G'day, Squig Bosses, AOS Coach here, and we are talking about the Gloomspite Gitz. 2 weeks ago, we did a episode focused around the Troggoths and the Spiders. It is a big book. There's a lot of synergy, and we've broken this up into two parts. And this episode, we are going to focus more on Squigs, and we're going to focus more on Moon Clan. Not to say we won't talk Trogs or Spiders, but we'll probably put a bit more focus and flavor on those two types of builds. My guest today is Stuart IrongutsmanMcCowan, who is a notorious Squig researcher, and he didn't know I did this introduction, and recently went 4-1 at CanCon before the new book. So he's not running the most busted stuff, winning tournaments. Did incredibly well with the old book before we had grand strategies, before we had battle tactics. CanCon is one of the world's largest events, and you did it with Squig Hoppers, which of all things people aren't talking about. So Stu and I are going to talk about Gitz. Moon Clan and Squigs are my favorite types of builds. So we'll talk a bit about how we're seeing the book and where was it? I want to call out this comment from Grumdy. Looking forward to understanding how we'll all be losing to Gitz for the foreseeable future. Not quite like that just yet, but we'll talk. So if you are on the other side of the fence and you're like, how do I beat Gitz? We'll share a bit about the synergies and the combinations and maybe what to expect. But Stu, g'day, welcome, shout out, introduce yourself, and people can find more about you on your YouTube channel.
Yep, so if you want to watch more of my stuff, later this week, I'll be doing a Gloomspite Gitz like A to Z, so I'll be going through every war scroll in detail and doing a bit of like a tier list. So you can check that out on youtube.com/@Irongutsman. They use tags now. Yeah, I'll be doing that. I'm of course happy today to be talking about Squigs, which is the best army in Age of Sigmar, without a doubt, in my mind.
They're so good. I was running them in 2019 and just like thoroughly frustrated on movement. Like the amount of times that Mangler Squig failed me with like a roll of a 4 or a 5 with movement, and then my army just sits there and gets shot off by Jezzails and things like that. I'm like, give me some consistency, but don't give me a flat movement. But this is your show, man. I've already talked a lot about Gitz, but how you feeling about this book?
Well, it's interesting because obviously last edition we had a situation where I think the book could handle itself very well on the board. Like we could easily like have a brawl in the middle and like sometimes overcome our opponent. But I look at the score at the end of the game and I'd be like losing by like 15 points because we had no battle tactics and grand strategies. And that meant it was just really hard to score points. And scoring points is how you win Age of Sigmar. So obviously got a new book now with grand strats and battle tactics. And honestly, if we had nothing else, I would be happy with just that. Like from the old book with Squig Hoppers. Now the other sides of the book, like Trogs and Squigs and stuff, I think needed some more love. But the state of 30 Squig Hoppers before this book was already really good. In my opinion, especially after that, Grimrack came out and we got the pile-in on death. I was already feeling really good about it. And then this new book comes out and we'll get into it. But yeah, the Hoppers got more buff than anything else in the book, even though they were, in my opinion, already the best thing. So that's the situation.
You are a massive fan, and I would have thought you've been sniffing too many like Loon Shrine, like Loon mushrooms or something. But you've obviously proven that Squig Hoppers do incredibly well. But what I've been really excited about is there are good builds. I can build around Boingrot Bounders, Hoppers, Squig Herd. And I know Squig Herd's got a lot of the noise, like people running 36, 72. They're just doing as many Squig Herd as humanly possible. But I've also been looking at the other side, the Moon Clan side, and there's some good builds. You can still build around some really interesting combinations, and some units actually got changed for the better. So I'm feeling positive. Before we get into the conversation, folks, this is pre-FAQ. So we don't know if any points are going to change. We don't know if any rules are going to change. If you ask Twitter, they would say that Scragrot is too cheap. They would say Squig Herd are doing too many mortal wounds for their cost. So maybe Squig Herd are going to go up. Maybe they will do mortals on 3s or 4s. We don't know what's going to happen. We're talking currently. So my advice to anyone, as I've said in this Discord, is if you own 72 squigs, awesome. Run your squig herd to your life's content. If you don't, maybe just hold off until the FAQ drops to see the state of play. Would you agree, Stuart?
Yeah, and I would say the same for 30 squig hoppers. Like, don't go and buy 3 units of 10 squig hoppers and assemble them to be squig hoppers just yet. Just keep it in the back of your mind, and yeah, have a look after the FAQ, I think. Yeah.
And you do have a great YouTube channel, by the way. I would recommend it. The link is in the episode description, so check it out. Go sub to Stu. Very, very good. And he also knows mustard. All right. The chat's going off. So we went from the slum house to the penthouse, right? Like let's be real. We were the bottom faction. Like when you look at like performance ladders, we were in the top 3, the bottom 3 easily. And now we are causing people nightmares. Why? Why is it that people are freaking out about Gloomspite? Are we that good? Or is it people just have forgotten how to play us and they're going to like have to have that experience first and then they'll learn?
I think basically what's happened is from the designer's point of view, I think that they've not entirely understood how the old book used to work. And I say that because the old book used to be like a 5-turn army where you would like grind and eventually actually beat your opponent on the board. So we had actually no issue in a fight. It was just like keeping up on points and doing enough damage in the early game. Okay. So what they've done is they've front loaded the damage. So now like everything just does a million damage. And then also they've made the durability better. And so now we're in a situation where not only are we a 5-turn army that just wins the grind, we also just win early game. So it's hard to see a weakness immediately from the army. We'll get into some interesting spots where there are weaknesses, but just in terms of like general flow of the game, it's hard to see where there is a weakness to some of these armies. Yeah.
Yeah, like when we look at the builds, we have good amount of wounds. Like my lists are always starting at like 170 wounds at least, which is massive, right? That's not even thinking about the Loon Shrine that brings back units at half strength.
Yeah.
I can get good access to Ren through things like the Jaws of Mork. I can get access to mortal wounds, and Squig Herd are one example, but Boingrots do mortals, Hoppers do mortals. There are other access like Scragrot's wand now does mortal. There's so many different mortal accesses. We now get our allegiance ability in turn 1, which is just brilliant. No longer do we have to sit there idle turn 1 doing nothing, hoping turn 2 we can use ours. Where else have we grown up from like a Squig / Moon Clan side?
Well, I think one of the major additions, which was actually at the end of last book, is the pile-in on death from Grimrack. Especially for Squig Hoppers, it was super important because what I found was I go into my turn, I do damage, and then because I have a 6-up save on my opponent's turn, they're just coming into me and just like melting the unit. And like I'll go down to like between 5 or 10 models and be able to rally them back, but I'm still not doing anything on my opponent's turn. Whereas if you have pile-in on death, suddenly like you're going in with the hoppers, you're killing something, they're charging you, killing the hoppers, and then the hoppers are killing something, and then you're rallying back the hoppers, and then the hoppers are killing something, and basically you're getting so much value out of this one unit. So I think the pile-in on death was huge. And then what you were saying along the lines with the moon is like huge. So before we only had the Loon Shrine, right? We had the Loon Shrine 12-inch aura, and then other than that, we were just sitting there just praying because the old moon mechanic was so bad. So one of the issues that I had was if it was in, let's say, like the bottom left quarter of the battlefield, and I wanted to make sure I could rally my squigs on the next turn. So what you'd do is you'd move them into the middle, like of for example, you could move them into that quarter, right? Okay, and you're gonna go like, all right, well, if it moves, if it doesn't move, it's staying in that quarter, so I can rally. That would be a 1, right? On a 2 to 5, it's going to move into the middle, so I can rally still there because if it's in the middle, it covers the whole board. But on a 6, it's going to skip to the quarter of the other side of the battlefield, and I can't rally my squigs. And if that happens, I'm going to lose the game. And there's just no way you can play around that. So now they've made it so it doesn't skip like that. It can only move one thing at a time. And yeah, as you were saying, it's starting in a quarter of the battlefield, and that's all great and all, but the main thing, in my opinion, is that Scragrot gives her out the aura now. So
It's
Yeah.
funny. I was playing my game. So I just came off the back last weekend. I played at like a 30-player event, and my last opponent was Lumineth, I think it was, or it was my opponent before in game 4. And I was explaining the moon, and he's like, "Okay, cool. So the moon comes from the shrine." I'm like, "Yes, there's a moon here from the shrine. There's a moon from Scragrot, and there's a moon from the moon." He's like, "Wait, there's 3 moons?" I'm like, "Yes." And I'm like, "If I want, I can get a 4th moon with the malevolent moon." And for anyone who hasn't seen the rules yet, we'll bring up the rules in a minute. But the moon is where we get access to a whole bunch of cool rules. So Squigs get extra rend. The Grots get the rally. Like, there's all these different benefits depending on what type of Git you are. But anyway, there's a lot of cool access, and unfortunately, we lost the Battle Shock immunity and things like that. But the moon is now much more consistent.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
Any units that you really like in this book that's kind of blown up? So you've said Grimrack, which is the new Underworld's warband. I haven't used him yet. What do you like about Grimrack?
It's mainly the piling on death, but also his 6 little dudes are like super handy. Now, I think part of it is that I play on TTS most of the time with massive terrain features. And so their big thing is when they deploy, you have to pick like a quest to do. For some reason, we now have like knights as part of the lore. I love it, but I don't know why. And basically, the quest is you got to like capture an objective that's in your opponent's territory or a terrain feature. Now, if you're in a situation where you're playing one of those maps where the territories are split halfway down the middle, you can be in a situation where you have a terrain feature that's across both deployment zones, or both territories. And sometimes you can be in a situation where that terrain feature is also within 3 of where you can deploy. And so what that means is you put the 6 dudes down and instantly get the 4-up ward on them. So that happens to me all the time on TTS. It's fantastic. And once those lads have the 4-up ward, well, they're actually 12 wounds with a 4-up ward. So they're really hard to kill, and they still have the 4-up rally. And the biggest thing with them is for some reason they can hold fanatics. so you can run around with like 5 or 10 hidden little fanatics in there. And I would say to your question, the fanatics are the unit to me that's got like the biggest glow up, the Loon Smasher fanatics. So they've gone down in points, and the biggest thing now is after the unit they're in is destroyed, they can still be set up, and the setup rules are ridiculous. It's wholly within 6 of the slain model, which is completely ridiculous. Like the range on that makes no sense. It doesn't have to be more than 3.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's
it's
good.
3
That's
when they
good.
come out in the charge phase. So you can either bring them out in the charge phase, start of the charge phase, either player's turn. It's wholly within 3 of the unit, more than 3 from enemy units. But if you're setting them up when your unit dies, it's just wholly within 6 of the last slain model. So you can imagine having like a long line of like stabbers or shooters, and your opponent comes in and kills them, and you're just going like, all right, I'm putting the Fanax wholly within 6. That's hitting your hero or something, and there's nothing they can do about it, right? Yeah. Super good. Yeah.
We're going to get FAQ'd to the wazoo. We are so going to get FAQ, which is a shame. We've been waiting for this book. So so fanatics are great. Obviously, Herd have been blown up. What else has had a glow up? Scragrot's had a big change to the way Scraggy kind of operates. What are some of the other things that you really enjoyed that maybe are sleeper units or things that people haven't looked at because they never ran it in the old book?
So the biggest one to me, which is actually the best war scroll in the whole book, is Sneaky Snufflers. Now they were already good, so people were running them like all the time, but 5-up ward is just the best buff in the game. Like there's just nothing better than putting a 5-up ward, especially on an army that has 1 million wounds. Like you might think about it. Okay, we have Griff Feather Charm right now, the 5-up ward little artifact that's coming at GHB. And if you put that on like a 6-wound hero, it's like fine. All right. It's like it's pretty good, but it's not amazing. You're basically getting, effectively 3 extra wounds, right? So you're going up to like 9 wounds. Well, let's say we put it on a unit that has 60 wounds. All right, it's a different question here. That's like massive value, like absolutely huge value. And it pushes it to the point where, like, for example, maybe your opponent's big hammer can kill your 60 shooters. Well, if they have a 5-up ward, maybe they can't. And if they can't, that means we're getting to do the 4-up rally. So the sneaky snufflers really have great synergy with the 4-up rally. And it also encourages you to bring like massive units of stuff. Now, the problem they have is, of course, they can't move after they do their 5-up ward thing. Unfortunately, we still have Hand of Gork in the army. You can still just teleport them and then just chuck the 5-up ward on something. And there's also other jank where you can like, string a unit back to the sneaky snufflers, and then when stuff dies, you can be in range of the buff and stuff like that. But yeah, they're a unit to me which you would look at them at 110 points and think that that's a lot, but in my mind, they should be more like 150 points. Just because 5-up ward, is just the most mental buff in all of Age of Sigmar. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, the Snuffler buff. Look, I'll be honest. Like when I did the preview, I was kind of down on them because not that I didn't value the 5-up ward, but my combination was always the Moonclan Stabbers with the sneaky Snufflers giving +1 attack, with the Loon Boss giving mortal wounds on 6s. So if you do 2 wounds attack, you can normally get 20 grots usually in combat minimum. That's 40 attacks, mortal wounds. You could just like pop them out, and then with some good rend as well, you could really like. I remember one shotting Thankful with a bunch of stabbers, just absolutely ripped him a new one, and I was kind of disappointed that we lost that. And I'm like playing around with the bubble on the Spore Splatter. I didn't really want to go into that, but when you remove what I had and then you add this, and I'm like, right, I've got real issues. And Stu and I were just talking about this before we went live. I've been running the Loon Boss on Mangler Squig. I love the Mangler Squig. It's one of my favorite models in the game. And right now it's 360 points. So 370 points. And I struggle with that payment because it's on the par of like a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. It's on par with a Frost Lord on Stonehorn. And the Mangler never survives that without the bounce away fight another day. But when you put that 5-up ward on, and you're like, right, I'm going to send it forward. Now I've got durability. You chuck it on 40 stabbers who can contest objectives outside of 9 with a 5-up ward. You've got someone who's going to kind of charge you and attack you in turn 1. You're really worried about piggies and iron jaws. Pull 5-up ward. You got a big meat shield.
Yeah, for sure. Now the weakness, obviously, with the Snufflers is you do have to roll a 2-up. Yeah, but that's why you just take 2 units and just roll it twice. So there you go. There's the solution. Yeah, they're amazing for sure. Another War Scroll that I would say has got a massive boost and were already really good. They're not as sexy as some of the other units in the book. Like, you look at them and it's just like, I mean, it's good, but do I really want to play with this many models? It's the shooters, right? The shooters are amazing now. Now it's really not the most fun way to play Warhammer for a lot of people. I know, Coach, probably you'll find we're playing like 100 mini dudes on the table, but yeah.
No, not because this is old Cunning Rock. This is when you have 40 shooters doing 2 attacks each, then you put the Gobbapalooza. By the way, Gobbapalooza, massive glow up there. And I assume that when the FAQ drops, they're probably gonna say you can't stack Gobbapaloozas. So I can't use. Yeah. I'm assuming that you're never gonna be able to do 2 Gobbapaloozas, making those 40 shooters Ren 2. Like, that's just ridiculous, and it probably shouldn't happen. But it's a lot of dice for a lot of. I mean, unless you've got a lot of buffs on, it's a lot of nothing. Well, because you're hitting on 4 unbuffs, you're hitting on 4s, wounding on 5s.
Yeah, but it's just, even with like no rend and all out attack, it's still like, if you have 60 of them, it's still 120 shots, and like you're getting, I don't know, something like, it's like, I think it's like 27 wounds through. So against like something that's like decently low save, like even a 4-up save, like if they have a 4-up save screen, your 60 shooters, like if it's 10 wounds at a 4-up save, the 60 shooters will take them off. And that's realistically sometimes all you need to do for the shooters to be useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was playing around with 40, and I think on average I expect about 17 wounds using the Gobblepalooza rend -1. But there's a lot of cool things, and I think we could kind of talk about this for days. I want to get to the rules in a second, but is there
Yeah.
anything that maybe you don't like from the new book? And I've already said the Mangler Squig, the Loon Boss on Mangler Squig is finding it harder and harder to justify it in my list. I had some cool tricks that I played. I did use Fight Another Day. I did get to bounce out of actually use the 3d6 bounce and kind of reposition, which was cool. But for 400 points, basically, it's quite an expensive tool that I could just reinvest somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the one for me that I really struggle to find a way to use them properly is just the Spore Splatter Fanatics. Like, I find the biggest thing that I didn't see when I first reviewed them is they lost the strike first. So it makes them like really terrible in combat because in your opponent's turn, they're just going to get instantly killed. And their buff now being wholly within 9 is just really hard to pull off. If they had reliable movement, like if they just move 7, it would be fine. But they move 2d6. So they've got this thing where it's like, okay, I'm trying to get my buff dudes in range, but they move 2d6. Like, how am I going to plan around getting them in range when I'm like trying to charge my big unit of stabbers or something? It just makes them really hard to play with, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they're an interesting one, and that's probably why I was a bit more disappointed with the Snufflers losing the +1 attack. Yes, if you roll a 6, you can get, yes, as Sickarth said, if you roll the 6, you can get the ward and the +1 attack. You're right, but relying on a roll of a 6 on the sneaky Snufflers, and I'm like, well, the Spore Splatters lose the -1 attack. It's very hard to get it in the Snufflers. That's why I was a little bit down, but obviously 5-up ward is bloody incredible. It's ridiculous when you put it on 40 stabbers, you put it on Boingrot bounders, for a base 4-up. But what I'd love to do is kind of move a little bit to the rules, right? So I've already done this discussion, as I've mentioned, folks, with a Trog and a Spider kind of focus. But talk to me about the Bad Moon as a Squig / Moon Clan player. I'm happy to talk more from the Moon Clan side because that's probably my specialty. How do you see the moon, and where do you put it from a quadrant point of view? Do you always put it on the same spot that you want to rally? Do you put it where your Loon Shrine is? How do you think about the placement and the way and we'll bring up the rules in a minute for the actual Bad Moon, but talk to me about the placement and of the orb.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the big thing with this thing is it happens like after you've deployed your army. So you're gonna like know what your own setup looks like before you pick where this is. And often I'm finding that because you have Scragrot in basically every army and also the Loon Shrine, you don't really have a need for it to be on your side of the battlefield often. But there are some situations where you want to do that. So from the Squig perspective, the main thing you're kind of looking to position this around is trying to get your like run and charge off if you want to send your Squigs in. And so you just have to like do some measurement. Can I get my unit wholly in my opponent's quarter? If I can, then let's put it there. Otherwise, you go, all right, I'm just going to put it on like a quarter that's on my side that's like close to them, and then I can try and make a charge from there if I want to do it. Yeah, but more often than not, I would say the placement turn 1 is actually not super important because you already have the buffs, like with the Loon Shrine and Scragrot. So, yeah, if you're not looking to pull off some run and charge play, you should just put it in the same quarter as Scragrot in case like something kills him. So usually what I find is that, like one side of my army is like the Loon Shrine and the other side's covered by Scragrot. So you got like both sides covered. But if Scragrot dies, then obviously you're not going to have the rally over there. So that's kind of a little bit of a weak point of the army if your opponent has some way to kill him, because obviously he can be shot because he's not a Galatian champion. So that's just a little bit of a weak point. And the same goes for if they have a really easy way to destroy the Loon Shrine, then you can do that. Yeah, it depends a lot on battle plan where you're initially going to put it, I would say. Because the other thing you can do is you can just put the Loon Shrine in the middle if you're in a battle plan where you can do that. And that will get you your run and charge because you can just use the Loon Shrine for that. And then in that situation, you're going to want to like cover, the quarter where you would have put the Loon Shrine so you can have the rally in there. Really what you're working with is like your Scragrot, your Loon Shrine, and this thing, and just trying to position so you've got your buffs everywhere that they need to be.
It's
Yeah.
really anticipating where you think you're going to need the battle to go. So, Stu, you mentioned a great point around where the objectives are going to be. What are the key objectives that you think you're going to be fighting over, and where do you want the moon to be? And once we're in the center of the board, it obviously affects the whole board, and then you can use Scragrots once per game to hold it. So, in the ideal world, turn 2, it's in the center of the board. Turn 3, you've held it with Scragrot. With any luck, turn 4, you roll a 1 to a 3 and it stays in the board. But there is obviously that random movement where it can stay in its current quarter. And that happened to me a few times last weekend, where in turn 2, I rolled that 1, 2, or 3 and it stayed in the quadrant. So it meant that either I had to hold back a little, or I'm relying more on Scragrot or something like the Malevolent Moon, if I had it in my my list, to get the buffs off into the center or in my opponent's territory.
Yeah. I would say with Scragrot most of the time I'm just chucking in the middle turn 2, because like I'm trying to avoid the scenario you just said where it's like stuck in the quarter, because that's just bringing back like past trauma for me of just like it being stuck there and not doing anything. So I'm just like, it's in the middle, it's affecting the whole board. We're done with the past. It's time for me to have some religious abilities, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like, as I've been playing with Squigs, I've actually thought to myself, do I need the Malevolent Moon? Because as an endless spell, it's fast, it's going to get up the board, and it's a nice fail-safe if I roll that 1, 2, or 3 and the bad moon doesn't move into the quarter. So it's some things that I'm thinking about, because it's actually quite a good little endless spell.
Yep, I agree. Chuck it up the board and get run and charge. Super good. Yeah.
Because what I found with my Squigs was, I turn 1, I wanted to launch an attack, but I was either I was outside my bad moon aura, or I wanted that ability, but and I didn't want to put Scragrot in the center of the board because I wanted him around a little longer.
Yeah.
But so you got your rules. We're talking bad moon now, So if you're Moon Clan, you get the 4-up rally for your Moon Clan. Your Squigs, you're going to get run and charge. Trogs get +1 to their saves. That moves them to like a base save of 3, which is ridiculous. And then your Spiders get to do mortal wounds on 5-up instead of 6-up. So talk to me about how this works for you and how you think about the bad moonlight.
I mean, the thing for us is just the 4-up rally, which is obviously ridiculous. I'm really surprised it stayed in. This makes the army tilted a little bit towards playing at least one bigger unit, so you can pull off like a big high value rally. Because the big thing with this, as opposed to the Loon Shrine, is you can do it in your opponent's turn as well. So in the Loon Shrine, you have to wait until your turn and then the end of your turn. So it's kind of low tempo, right? Like you're getting stuff out on the board kind of later than you want it to be. But this is like a high tempo way of returning models. So super strong, in any army, but particularly in an army like this where historically we've kind of had a little bit of a tempo issue, particularly with some of the like slower units, like with stabbers. Like let's say you go in and then you kill some stuff and then your opponent hits you back. If that unit dies, then you're going to have to wait until the end of your turn to bring it back from the shrine. And at that point, you're kind of like losing some board control. So here, basically what you can do is you can go in with the stabbers or some other unit and you get hit back, and then you can just kind of like delete models back to a point where you're inside the moon aura, whether that be from Scragrot, the shrine, or the moving moon. And at that point, you can do 4-up rally, and you can still keep your board presence while also returning models. So that's where this is much better than the Loon Shrine buff. And then for Squigs, the run and charge, I really wish that this was like at the start of the turn or something. So like if I was under the light at the start of the turn, I could run and charge, but we still have to measure it basically in the charge phase. So just one thing to be careful with the moon aura is like you have to be wholly under one of them. Like we've got like several auras. We've got like the Loon Shrine, all the things we mentioned. Basically, there's 4 of them, right? But you need to be wholly under one of them. You can't have like half and half. So with these big units, it's just it's important you make sure that you're wholly under one of them, not like split halfway down the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, so really, like when I think about this, and I'll go back to the map, when I'm thinking about being an aggressive turn 1 charge, let's say I put the Bad Moon in this quarter, and I don't have to put it in this quadrant, by the way, I can put it into any quadrant. I really want to measure out, and I really want to make sure that I don't cross the line here, because otherwise I'm going to lose my ability. And it could just be, and you got to think about your pile-ins, you got to think about your synergies and your bubbles and things like that. But if you pre-measure that and you're an aggressive turn 1 player because you want to run Boingrots into people's face, just be mindful where this line is, because otherwise you'll lose the ability. And yeah, I love the Lunar Squig's ability. You've really got to watch out with the hoppers because they have a base move of, was it 10 plus D6? So that speed gets you out of that bubble very quickly. While your Boingrots are 7 plus D6. So it's probably a good chance you still stay, but and then the Mangler Squig's what, 10 plus D6 or something. So
yeah.
The other thing I'll call out really quickly, and then I'll kind of move on, is when you're thinking about it from a Moon Clan side, which is the way I think about. I know some people might not think about like the 4-up rally being important. Like, well, what happens if I'm in combat? You know, really planning your combat and where you start removing models so that you can, one, you can rally in both hero phases, obviously, but two, if you've got this big unit that Stuart's talking about, the 40 or the 60 stabbers or the 40 or 60 shooters, if you are measuring your 3 inches, so you can pull out of combat by removing slain models, boom, then you hit your 4-up rally and you just grow that unit back significantly. So again, planning for the future.
Yeah, one really kind of important micro mechanic with this army is like casualty removal, and just a small tip to help with it. So if you're trying to get out of combat and your opponent's done some damage to you, if you're taking battle shock, what you can do is just remove, say, models like in the middle of your stringing back unit, and in that way you can basically break the front half of the unit from coherency, because coherency break happens after battle shock. So we always kind of have this this nice zone where, like, even if we hadn't removed the right models that we wanted to in combat, you can still just roll your battle shock. And this is a case where us being like bravery 3 or 4 is actually a bit of an advantage, because even if we've lost like 4 models, we're guaranteed to lose some models. So you can always use that to remove models, break coherency, and then get in the 4-up rally range. And most of the time, if you sit down and work that out, it's actually going to be better to do that than pass battle shock in terms of the number of models you actually have in the unit. So that's something to do for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a really good comment. And it actually ties nicely into the segue, which is the 2 new heroic actions. So one for the Moon Clan hero, one for the Dank Cold Trog boss. I use this basically every turn I possibly could. So
yeah.
beckon for the Lunatic Horde. You can rally 3 times. Now, there's 2 key benefits here. Actually, Stuart, I'll let you explain. But for me, there's 2 clear benefits before any other. Why do you like this particular heroic action?
Yeah, now I would say, like, it seems really amazing that you can rally 3 times, but I would say that doesn't come up too often. The main reason that you're using this is because it just doesn't cost the CP. You just rally for free, right? Yeah.
100%. So if you're going for the CP and you're always going to rally, obviously if you want the CP for something else, different story. But instead of trying to go for that heroic leadership for a 4+ or a 2+, depending on if your general's on the table or not, this is guaranteed. It's just straight up, boom. I was going to rally anyway. I'll take the CP. No dice roll required. And if I happen to have 3 units, awesome. If I run Scragrod or it's my general, then I'm rallying within an 18-inch aura instead of like 12 or 6. So amazing.
Yep. I'd say also you can, if you're going second with the Galatian champion, you can obviously do this and then also roll a 4-up for heroic leadership. So that's mega. Yeah.
Wait, there's more. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a Squig and Moon Clan show, but I do like the Trog boss heroic action. I actually think it's pretty good. It's just one of those things that's is to keep in the back of your mind, because it's kind of specific, but can be pretty handy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very. Would that alone make you take a Dank Cold Trog boss?
No. But he has other benefits for sure. Which we'll get into a bit later, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're not taking it purely because of weight and smash, but it is a nice little ability to have. It is a great little hero if you want to take it. The other two, I get the feeling we're gonna skim through one of these really quickly. What's your thoughts on the two monstrous rampages? One being for a Ragnarok, and then one for Squig, Mangler Squig.
The Ragnarok one is awful. I would love if that gets buffed in the fact, because it just doesn't do anything. And I'm never doing that ever.
Someone on Twitter actually tagged me and said they did it. They actually rolled a 6 on it as well. So kudos to you. I can't remember who your name was immediately, but they did actually do the ensnaring web. But it's just such a, like, when I've got all the monstrous rampages like Raw Stomp, Titanic Jewel, maybe not Titanic Jewel, but like even like Smash to Rubble, like ensnaring web is the last one I'm going to pick.
Oh yeah, yeah. Giant Boing, which is the Mangler Squig one, is pretty fun, but I just hate personally that it's just worse than the Stonehorn one. Like, can we do some mortar wounds as well, please? Like, why is it just worse? I mean, it's great. And it's it makes the Mangler Squigs into more of like a backline threat now. Whereas they used to kind of be like the end of screens. They'd have a big problem with that. Now you can like ram them into the screen. They do mortar wounds when they charge. And then, 3d6 and just hope you roll well and hit the back. But obviously 3d6 is pretty unreliable. We've upgraded our movement from 3d6, but not this, unfortunately. So it's great, but you can roll low and then it's just a bit crap, isn't it? But that's all right. Yeah.
I will argue in our defense that our base size is a lot smaller than a Frostlord on Stonehorn. I'm yet to see anyone execute the Frostlord on Stonehorn actually any useful, because they haven't rolled enough that the base can actually do anything. But I have used Giant Boing a number of times to leap a screen or move from an elite unit into the support hero and just slap it. So, but it goes back to my argument earlier that the Mangler Squig is quite expensive at the moment. And even though that I buffed it up with the artifact, I buffed it up with the sub allegiance, I did everything I possibly could other than like Sneaky Snuffler, it's still a lot of points.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anything else you'd want to mention on the command traits, or do you want to, sorry, not command traits, the allegiance abilities, or do you want to give me some of your thoughts on your favorite command traits?
Yeah, well, we can talk about the command traits. All in all, like, there's only a few of these that are like amazing. I think Clammy Hand is like, it's decent, but it tends to be the one you just kind of take if you don't have a plan for your general. Like, you're just like, all right, I have like a Squig Boss general, let's give him Clammy Hand, because what else is he going to do? But it's a good ability. But as I was saying before with the Loon Shrine, it's kind of low tempo. So if you're going to take Clammy Hand, I feel like you kind of need a plan for a unit that you're just going to deliberately blow up. Like, you're going to send in some Squeak Herd or something, and then they're going to die. And then at the end of your turn, like the turn, you send them in on your turn and then die on your turn, so you can roll it on your turn. That's a bit like higher tempo. Then this is pretty handy. The other use is if you've got like a big unit of 30 Squeak Hoppers or something, and you warrant a guarantee you can get the 15 back, then this is pretty good as well. But yeah, overall, I would say it's not as strong as it seems like on paper. Like, I've played this now probably like 25 games, and I'm yet to actually use it. Like, it's yet to actually be relevant in any of my games. Yeah.
Yeah, my issue at the moment is the Loon Shrine is no longer garrisonable. It's now you can't put anyone in it, so it means your hero has to be hanging out. I see some use of this in combination with the King's Gitz, and we'll get to the allegiance abilities in a minute. But when you do King's Gitz with the Clammy Hand, yeah, but I'm always traditionally against relying on things to die as opposed to what I can do on the table. So.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. 100% agree on that. Yeah, you don't want to die to win the game. You just want to like kill your opponent and win most of the time. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it could give you a little bit more, because one of my troubles is I always roll poorly on bringing models back from the shrine. I think literally last weekend over 5 games, I didn't roll it once. I just suck at that roll. And even if I don't want to go King's Gitz, this is at least a better chance to bring back that one super unit. In your case, the 30 Squig Hoppers back to 15, or my 15 or 10 Boingrots, whatever it might be. But outside of Clemmy Hand, do you have any other favorites or ones that you really like?
I love super nasty venom on the Scuttle Boss. I think it's like super handy. Yeah, I think in all these books that GW is releasing lately, there's always like your like 130 point bargain bin hero that is bad if he doesn't have a command trait on artifact, but if you're willing to spend the command trait on artifact, just becomes really good and like way exceeds his points value. And like the Scuttle Boss is definitely part of this. So super nasty venom is super good. And then the other one I would say from the Trog side is obviously Loon Skin is amazing, because I think Scuttle Tide in particular is just an absolute standout war scroll in this book, and just being able to take it for free, in my mind, kind of means that the Dank Cold Trug Boss costs like 115 points, and at 115 points, he's excellent. So yeah, I think that one's amazing. Yeah.
So I used Fight Another Day last weekend on my Loon Boss on Mangler, and it was actually quite useful being able to do the massive boing to be able to leap around and you know, the way I used that particular piece was to be able to reposition my Mangler Squig so the minimum amount of attacks could go back into my unit if I roll poorly or whatever it was. But then I've also, even if I wanted to stay in combat, but then Fight Another Day, being able to move 2d6, that was really helpful to reposition. There was one particular game where I ran into 6 Varangard, and then Varangard have a once per game ability where they can fight twice, but they strike last the second time. I was able to, my opponent hit me because they charged me, then I fought, and then I bounced away, so I stopped that unit of Varangard fighting again, which was really helpful. But then I played like an Iron Jaws unit that just slapped it off the board, and I didn't get to use that at all. So it is situational. It's useful, but do I want to make it my general's command trait? Not sure.
Yep. I think if you're taking the Loon Boss and Mangler Squig, this is just the one you're taking, right?
Yeah.
But it's just whether he's worth it or not is the thing. Yeah.
That's the question. And obviously, yeah, I mean, there's some good options here. Like, you know, I don't mind Squig Whisperer, but to me, I think like Loon Touch, Clammy Hand, or Fight Another Day, or super nasty Venom, depending on your build. And obviously the Trog side we talked about. What are the artifacts? Where are you at with artifacts? And are there any particular units that you like to give these artifacts to?
There's actually not a lot of great ones here, I'm going to be honest. Like particularly in the Moon Clan side. So, like if you're taking the Loon Boss and Mangler Squig, you're going to take the Teeth Caps for the extra rend. The Mommet is like pretty good, but we have other ways to get extra rend now that are less conditional. So I don't think it's necessarily as auto include as it used to be. From the Spiders and Trog side, the Spider ones are all really good, like all exceptional. If you're taking a spider list, I wonder if you almost just take all three. So the Scuttle Boss only being hitting on 5 and 6s is amazing. The bonus to cast is like one of the only reliable like bonus to cast in this army. I mean, I say reliable. You know, you roll a dice and add the results to the casting roll, so you can roll a 1. But you know, this is super strong if you like want to guarantee getting Scuttle Tide off or something. You know, you're already getting a +1 when a Spider Fang Wizard casts it. So you do this, and you can guarantee getting Scuttle Tide off. And then the Totem, which they just copy and pasted from Cruel Boys, lets you do extra mortals on 6s. And from the Trog side, you're taking the Glowy Howser. That thing is amazing. It's just like awesome. Like 4-up ward. Where it turns off is like pretty rare. Like you have to take some wounds, and then at the end of the phase, roll a 1. It's like super rare. It's going to feel super bad when it happens, but pretty rare. Yeah. Overall, just an absolute amazing artifact. I would say more than any of these, I'm usually finding myself taking the Nightflyer Cloak from the General's Handbook, and it's chucking it on the Loon Boss. So that way I can start him in reserve. He's usually also my general, so I'm not losing, you know, my non-Scraggot general turn 1, and also my opponent has nowhere to get rid of him. And then I'm popping him 9 away, and then usually he also has leadership of the Alpha, so I can pop him 9 away, and then triple issue his command ability for mortal wounds. So I find the Nightflyer Cloak is usually what I'm using instead of any of these, just so you can keep a buff piece off the board. So you can guarantee it being in range and then also guarantee that it doesn't die, which can happen with a Loon Boss. So yeah, these are good, but I think that one's better.
Let's assume it's 6 months from now when we're not in the General's Handbook. We're in a different one. What's the artifact you're choosing from the Moon Clan hero?
Probably either the +1 to cast or Moonface Moment. I've had a couple lists where I've been choosing between those two. +1 to cast is pretty good if you pair it with Bad Snatchers, which we'll get to in a minute, because because Scragrod has +1 to cast, but he has the King Gitz keyword. So if you want +1 to cast and also re-roll a dice, this is the only way to do it. So this is pretty handy as well. Yeah.
Moonface Moment is also worth calling out because it used to be locked to the Madcap Shaman. Now it can be used for a fungoid as well, which has been really helpful. And in this season, last weekend, I was playing with Moonface Moment and Tunnel Master. So being able to like run my Squig Herd up the board, then use my once per game Tunnel Master, come out, point my little wand to give it Rend -1. So then with the Squig Herd charging, mortal wounds on 6s from the Squig Boss, it was just an industrial amount of damage. And I would lift like twice in 2 different games. I lifted 15 of 20 Chaos Warriors with the Nurgle banner and the Nurgle mark from one round of combat. So with those 2 combinations, and that's all I needed, right? And that was really helpful. But yes, I know the irony that I just said 6 months from now, but I don't mind the Moonface Moment. And, if we don't have Tunnel Master, I can Hand of Gork it if I'm trying to set that up.
I would say the Tunnel Master is the thing that makes this thing a lot better to me, because not only is Hand of Gork not reliable, the big thing is the redeploy timing. So with Tunnel Master, you can essentially do it at the end of the phase. So it means you move everything up, you wait for your opponent to do any redeploys, and then you pop it down. And that guarantees you getting the moment. Whereas before, if you teleport the guy in range and then you're like trying to charge him with a unit, where they just go, "I'll redeploy," and you're only 9 away. So if they roll a 3, you're stuffed. They're outside of the range of the moment. So on a 3 up, they just dodge the moment. Whereas now you're just like, all right, Tunnel Master, in it goes. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think if we didn't have Tunnel Master, I would less likely use it with a Squig build, who are just super fast at my fungoid won't catch up on. But it's still incredibly valuable with my slow moving Moon Clan. So my stabbers, my shooters. Obviously, I can't use it in combination with shooters, but I don't need the speed to be able to point and click because my board they're moving up the board.
Yeah, as a defensive tool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What it spells? I agree with you, by the way. I think Bad Snatchers and that +1 artifact, the spellcasty one, would actually work quite well. I think as a little bit of a sleeper artifact that no one's not nearly enough talking about.
Okay, the spell laws. So I was a bit disappointed because I lost my favorite spell, which was the green spite spell.
Oh, so good. 60 stabbers. You grab the mortal wounds, you shoot it up the board. It was so bloody good.
24-inch range, D6 mortal wounds. Now, Scragrot's spell is kind of the same thing because it's 24-inch range mortal wounds. So I'm all right with it. The big thing for me that that's changed, that hasn't changed here, is that Hand of Gork is still range 24, which just kind of blows my mind that that's still a thing, because you can do stuff like string 60 shooters like across your entire deployment zone and then go turn 1. It's like, I spent 10 minutes setting that up, but let me just pick them up again and put them somewhere else. Like, yeah, the 24-inch range is like amazing. Then the other spells here,
Stop.
itchy nuisance.
Stop. I want to pull you back for a second. I'm going to pull you back. Talk to me about Hand of Gork, because a lot of people talk about Hand of Gork and they love it. Why do you love it? And then also give me who's a good recipient, or what are good positions to use Hand of Gork?
Okay, so the main reason from a competitive standpoint that I love Hand of Gork is because it makes our turn 1 much better. So if we're given first, which often we will because we're high drop a lot of the time, you can do stuff like string 40 shooters across the entire board so your opponent cannot leave their deployment zone using Hand of Gork. And without that, we kind of have a little bit of a weakness to getting doubled because we're a little bit of like a castle army. So if our opponent has a way to just like blow off one line of our screens and then get into the juicy stuff, there's a bit of a weakness to being doubled. So Hand of Gork can kind of smooth that out a little bit because we can teleport our screen really far up. And so that means that on bottom of one, our opponent charges and kill the screen, but then on their next turn, they're not really in range to kill something that's valuable. So that's the I think in my head the primary use of Hand of Gork. And then the second thing is just keeping buff units in range, and particularly the Snufflers are required to stay in range. And then the other one I would say is like teleporting like Scragrot up the board, so his Loon Shrine aura can be used for like the Squig's run and charge. So those are like the three uses in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to call that out because like the Snuffler being able to, because you can't move, using that to kind of replace that ability, which is awesome. One that I use often is teleporting my Stabbers, which has the Loon Smasher Fanatics in it. So then set up the Loon Smasher, the Stabbers outside of 9. Then you release the Fanatics. So it's a 6-inch charge. If you've got big grapefruits and you don't have a hero around to issue the re-roll the charge, you gotta hope and pray you roll that 6-inch charge, and you could really strike someone in the face very early, but you are gambling. The other ability I actually the reason I love it is actually for the late game. So being able to regenerate those models from the Loon Shrine, I can then get them back into the fight quicker by grabbing them, moving them up the board, whether it is 3 regenerated Squig Herd or Hoppers, whether it is 20 or 10 Stabbers. I can get them back in the board and even cap objectives and steal them late game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now, cool. Now talk. I just don't want to skip over that because people like how do you use the teleport effectively?
Yeah, it's I'd say this spell is like one of the most important things in the army for sure. The other spells are a little bit situational. Itchy Nuisance is great. So 18-inch range, they get strike last. But it's only to the end of that turn. So it's like something that you want to go kill now. And if you're running bigger units, generally you're not like gang bashing them with a bunch of different units. But if you're running like some MSUE kind of build, this can be handy. And then Nick It is just too low range. It's super hard to get this to work. I rolled a 9 the other day. I was very sad. I needed a 10. But if you get a 10 and you can turn the artifact off, it could be pretty good. But 12-inch range is the issue for me. And then Squig Lure, I actually like this spell quite a bit. I know reroll charge doesn't seem that great, but on the Squig Herd, there's no other way to get them reroll charge. And then even on the Hoppers, it could save you a CP, and I kind of like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that what you said, the first part is, I just want to highlight that the Squig Herd cannot issue or receive commands, so they can't rally, they can't roll a flat 6 for a run, you can't re-roll a charge. So Squig Lure is the way around that. So if you're going to invest in a unit of 24 or 36 Squig Herd, you need access to Squig Lure, because otherwise you could buff them up to the 9s with the Squig Boss and all the other buffs, and then they fail that charge and you cry because you can't issue a command.
Yeah, and what's great about it is it's 18-inch range and it's only cast on a 5. So realistically, turn 1, if Scragrot's out of unbind range, you just need to roll a 4 and you're going to get it off. So if you're looking for some Squig Alpha, this is a great spell for sure. Yeah.
I found my opponents just ignored that spell. They let that go through the keeper. They were worried about Scragrot's signature spell and they were worried about that and Hand of Gork. And with Squig Lure, they just let it slide. It was actually so valuable to my build, especially with 36 Squig Herd.
Yep.
It also might be worth calling out that Scragrot knows the entire spell lore of the Moon Clan, so that helps you access those situational things.
Yeah, so even though Nick It is like kind of situational, you get it on Scragrot anyway, so don't have to worry about taking it instead of another spell. Yeah.
With a Moon Clan and a Squig type list, like heavy investment in those two or one of the others, would you consider taking a Spider Wizard for access to any of those Spider Fang spells?
I think the short answer is no. The problem we have in Gitz is for some reason they've decided to give us like 79 sources of -1 to hit. So Sneaky Distraction is an awesome spell, but there's a Gobblepalooza spell that does the same thing. The Nets do the same thing. The Fellwater Trogs do the same thing. And it's kind of like, once you've got enough -1 to hit, it caps out at -1. it's not so useful to keep stacking them. So this is an amazing spell, but not actually required in this army. And then Curse of the Spider God, I think is pretty bad. I think it's just mega situational. If like Archeon or something starts coming back into the meta, maybe you use it. But otherwise, no. And Scuttling Terrors is just it's a spell for the Spider Fang, so you're not going to necessarily bring it in for the Moon Clan. Yeah.
I will say, and I think I might have mentioned it in the past, the Web Spinner Shaman is 65 points.
Yeah.
So it's such a dirt cheap wizard, and if you're looking for an easy way to get like eye for an eye or something, it's actually not a bad little sacrificial piece. And obviously, while we're playing with Galatian champions, a 65-point hero actually isn't a bad investment. I always use Sneaky Distraction when I go for it, but it's not strong enough that I would always pick a Spider Fang wizard just to have it, that particular spell. But it's, again, 65 points is nothing.
Yeah, it's nothing. Yeah, he's super good for sure. Yep.
It's super cheap. I don't know how we got it for so cheap. But we also have 5 sub-factions. So 3 existing, 2 news. What are your thoughts? Let's talk Squig first. You're a Squig man. Thoughts on the Jaws of Mork?
Okay, so Jaws of Mork is just the best of these by like not even close. I kind of wish that these sub-factions would not exist. So in Ogres, there was a similar one, which was just -1 rend on the shooting thing. Yeah, it's just a little too obvious. Because like +1 attack on the charge on all your squigs is just gonna be probably better than any of the other benefits that are on the other allegiances. But there are some other things going on. So the King's Gitz, I think, would push you towards some kind of like either like sacrificial squig herd build where you're like sending in squigs and blowing up and then bringing them back. And you might be able to argue that it's better to take King's Gitz than Jaws of Mork in that build because you can guarantee that you can get squig herd units back. And then also some kind of like MSU build. So you're running like lots of small units. Then you can kind of guarantee that more of them die and you can use the clammy hand. So you roll twice and then you re-roll it and then you're getting lots of stuff back. So King's Gitz is good for like that MSU sort of style, I think. And then Bad Snatchers is like a really strong ability. Now, there are some problems with this. So first of all, Bad Snatchers Moon Clan Wizard is actually only 3 units. You would think it's more than that, but it's actually just Fungoid, Madcap, and Gobblepalooza. Those are the only 3 units that have those keywords. So
because Zarbag Gitz is also locked to the King's Gitz. Scragrot's a King's Gitz. Everyone else is not Moon Clan Wizard, unless you gave like Arcane Tome to like a Loon Boss or something.
Yeah, so Arcane Tome Loon Boss as well for sure. But yeah, if you're wholly within 9 of any other wizards, so if you're in a Gobblepalooza unit with 2 wizards in it, they just get it. It's just funny. Then you can reroll one of the dice. So that's pretty good. I think this is like better than like a full reroll if you want to guarantee getting some like high result. So let's say, for example, you've rolled like a 6 and a 1, then you can reroll the 1 into a better number, and that way you're kind of getting like a 9. But unfortunately, it's not as good at assuring that you actually get the spell. And yeah, even if you reroll one of those 1s into a bigger number, you know, the max you're going to get is 7. Realistically, you're going to get like, 5 or under. So yeah, it has some different strengths when compared to something like Cogs. But yeah, for getting big casting rolls, this is super useful.
Yeah, it's my challenge, and maybe I haven't used Bad Snatchers just yet. I don't find the spell lore strong enough to make me want to focus on the wizards. Now, if Scragrot could be in Bad Snatchers, different story. And Zarbag's Gitz, if they were there, I'd be okay with it. If I had the Great Green Spite, I'd be okay with it. But like, do I need Bad Snatchers? Like, for me, I'd probably rather invest in King's Gitz and pay for cogs than. But I see your point, right? Like, you could get yourself out of a miscast. You could get yourself a stronger spell cast for, as you said, re-roll the lowest dice to hopefully a higher dice. I don't know. For me, as a Moon Clan / Squigs player, Jaws and King's Gitz are probably the two standouts. Now, obviously, if I'm Spiders, you've got Grimscuttle. If I'm Trogs, I'm Glog's Mega Mob. But they're the two ones I'd be dancing towards.
Yeah, I think with Spiders as well, since Grimscuttle's a little bit kind of situational / bad. I think King's Gitz is probably just better for the Spiders, isn't it? So, yeah.
I agree. I wasn't going to go down that path because it's not the Spider Fang show. But I will say, like, for example, so I told you the story earlier about my ridiculousness that was lifting, 15/16 Chaos Warrior Nurgle banner. They're ridiculous to lift. Like, folks, if you haven't fought one of them just yet, they are very hard it's a hard nut to crack. But when you have, like, I'm going to use my example, the Squig Herd, which has 3 attacks, on the charge turns to 4 attacks. I can use the Squig Boss to give them mortal wounds on 6s to hit. They are base rend of -1. I can get, that's rend -1. If I happen to use, any other rend mechanism, obviously that increases. But if I get those Squigs attacking the Chaos Warriors, which they did, that's 120 attacks. Mortals on 6s. And then they're mortals in addition. So then the rest of them just carry over. And yeah, it's like 4s and 3s or 3s and 4s. I think it's 4s and 3s. I'd use my Mangler Squigs once per game mushroom to give +1 to wound aura.
Yes.
So they're wounding on 2s. It's just, and obviously you can get the triumph for a +1 to wound if you wanted to. It's just the volume out of Squig Herd. That's why I know they have a target on them for an errata. So don't go out and buy all of the Squig Herd at your local game store just yet.
Yep.
But they're so bloody good. Where are you at with these match play rules? Are you going for a battle pack grand strat, or are you liking any of them? I tried Protect the Shrine, by the way. Dumb move. So dumb.
Yeah.
I had to play with my shrine defensively, and it was just dumb.
I think with Protect the Shrine, you're taking this if it's like my army does 1,000,000 damage. And if I haven't blown my opponent off, then I'm probably losing the game anyway. This is where this would be good. But then you might argue you can just take any grand strat and it's going to work. I think the one here that I would actually take is probably Chasing the Moon. And you probably take this one if you have a Dankhold Trog Boss General with the 4-up ward. Because I think it's pretty realistic he's not going to die if you play him kind of defensively, right? It's like a 3-up save, 4-up ward as long as he's under the moon. So just keep him alive and just stick him next to Scraggler up for 3 battle rounds, and it's doable. So that's the grand strats. Now the battle tactics are really good. I was like a little bit iffy about them when I first went into them. So the thing that we don't have really is a turn 1 battle tactic that's super reliable. So you might just want to just consider that in your army. So we were talking about the Web Spinner Shaman before. What I really like is just taking Tunnel Master and the Web Spinner Shaman, just doing Cunning Maneuver turn 1. He's going to die, but it's 65 points, right? Like, that's a fine investment. If he dies, then we can do Eye for an Eye on the next turn. The Web Spinner Shaman's really good for kind of smoothing out that turn 1. Now, if you don't have a Web Spinner Shaman, I think the one you're kind of looking to, if you're going second, is going to be the Moonlight Raid battle tactic, which is take an objective off your opponent. That can be really good if you're going second. They take something and then you move Scraggler up with some unit and you take it off them. That's really good. And then the other one from the GHB would be Desecrate. So those are the two if you're doing on turn 1, I think, if you don't have the Web Spinner. But I really think take the Web Spinner with Cunning Maneuver, because after that, there's heaps of stuff that we can do here. So Follow the Moon, super easy to do. Stab him in the dark can be pretty easy to do depending on the state of the game. Sometimes this can be like a little bit of a consolation prize. If you've rolled that 1 to 3 on turn 2, it's like, well, I can get my battle tactic now because I just send my hoppers outside of the light and go and kill something. But yeah, I think of these, the easiest that are easy to do are the Follow the Moon and Moonlight Raid are definitely the 2 easiest ones on here. Because you don't have to actually kill anything, right? You just like move on objectives, and we're very good at moving on objectives. So
Yeah, I found stab him in the dark actually wasn't too bad as well, especially with an aggressive turn 1 if my opponent charged up the board. And I was quite confident I could take out whether it was a cheap screen or whatever it was. And obviously the benefits as well is I know where the bad moon's going to be before I pick my battle tactics. So if I know that the moon's in the center, I can pick follow the moon in turn 2 onwards, guaranteed basically. So
Yeah.
so that they're quite good. There's obviously unfortunately no battalions for us. Obviously there's the Trog version, but I probably wouldn't take this combination personally.
No, I don't think so. Not in our Moon Clan one.
No, but even like in a Trog version, I'm like, oh, I'd rather just take more Fell Water and more Rock Guts, to be honest.
Fair enough. Yep, I agree.
yeah. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, the Dankhold Troggoth is still difficult to fit in there. He did get a lot better, but still not as good as just running 3 Rock Guts, I think.
Yeah, and Fell Water are just so good.
Fell Water, amazing. Yeah.
I'm not going to go through all of the War Scrolls unless you want to do it. I feel like we could be here for 10 years, but I do want to acknowledge the Squig Boss. And the Squig Boss being a new unit, 80 points. It's like a 4-wound idiot, but the value, like I'm not even going to worry about the attack profile. This guy should never be in combat. Let's worry about that for a second. Why do we take? First off, what do you think of the Squig Boss, and why do we take it?
I think it's ridiculous. I think this is like stupidly undercosted. Like it should be at least like 130 or something. Like I think this guy is going to have the same fate as the Skink Priest, where he's going to just keep going up 10 points every GHB to the end of time. Because 6 is the hit doing mortals is a pretty good buff. That's up there with the 5-up ward. It's pretty good. Now, if that was just it, you'd still taken him. But then in addition, yes.
not instead, or not the sequence ends. In addition,
yep. So that's amazing. So like, let's say we're talking about the situation before where we have 120 attacks coming out of Squig Herd. That's going to be 20 mortal wounds on addition. So you're asking yourself, would I spend 80 points to do 20 mortal wounds? I think the answer to that question is yeah, I'm going to do that. so maybe he should be more than 80 points. Now the justification is that he's 4 wounds on a 6-up save, but he's just landed in a season where that is much less of an issue than it used to be, because not that many people are taking sharpshooters at the moment. So he's realistically not going to get shot that much. What he more has to worry about is like some kind of AoE mortals or something. That's more of the issue. But because his microfiles pouch is just within 3, you can really deploy him pretty far back and just, make sure the guy at the back. So in your Squig Herd unit, make sure your handlers at the back, they're just within 3 of him. Then you're going to be fine. So you can always deploy him like 40 inches away from whatever's going to hit him. And you're absolutely fine doing that. So he has that. That's one buff. And then he also has Release to Squigs, which is at the start of the hero phase. Basically, you can move your Squig Herd. Now, you do have to be careful with this. Make sure you don't like move them out of the his other ability, which is in the hero phase. So you do the movement and then you do the buff. So you just have to make sure that you're stringing back so you can stay within 3, so you can still get your buff off. Yeah, and obviously this kind of would make you tilt towards like taking him in a more Squig Herd heavy build. But I found even just taking like 1 unit of 12 Squig Herd in a Squig Hopper heavy build can be super valuable. Because having like a screen that like goes far up the board can be good at kind of blocking your opponent in, depending on the terrain, right? We can make like a line to block my opponent getting on some objectives. So having like a super fast Squig Herd unit is great. And ultimately at 80 points, like he doesn't have to make use of this ability to be amazing still. So yeah.
What I do, just to talk about your Release to Squigs, is I actually deployed the Squig Boss at the front of the line, then surround my Squig Herd around it. So when the Squig move, they're 6 plus D6. I will always still have them within 3, and it's not as hard to keep up. So, but when I have him at the back and then they move their movement, I need Hand of Gork. Even then, I can't use Hand of Gork. Like it's just I get out of sequence. So that's how I've gotten around it. But yeah, it's incredible value. This is another unit that I could see going up in points. 80 points is incredible value. I know I was talking to my mate Austin, Aussie. He's like, he runs 2 units of 24 squigs. He's like, I need 2 squig bosses. And I'm like, yeah, you probably do actually.
I mean, all of those things are so cheap, but Squig Herd is so cheap as well. So yeah.
They're
Anyway,
probably both going up. Do you want to talk about any other units, or do we want to go to lists?
maybe let's just cover some of the heroes. I think.
Sure. All right. So we got Scraggy, we got the Madcap Shaman, we got the Fungoid.
Yeah, so Scragrot is the big one that I think you're taking in just about everything. We've spoken about how he has the moon aura, but also his Fangs of the Bad Moon spell is amazing. We're in a GHB where we can't remove enemy heroes that well, but this is one that can do it really well. So 24-inch range, amazing, and basically you roll a number of dice. So you go to the casting roll, and a 3-up, you do a mortal wound. So if you're casting this on, like, let's say a 9, you're going to do 6 mortal wounds on average, which will take out the thing that you need to take out. So that's amazing. The other wizards on here, the Madcap and the Fungoid Cave Shaman, I think that these are a little bit weaker than they used to be. And the reason for that is because the spell lore's gotten quite a bit weaker. So you're only kind of needing Hand of Gork from the spell lore. So these two don't have so much of a use if you're also taking Scragrot. The things that I would say you'd use them for is for carrying a Mommet, or in the case of the Fungoid, his little Spore Maw spell you can kind of use out of the spell portal, and it's actually pretty good. Like it'd only be like basically 24-inch range, but it's like a little D6 mortal wound blast that can be pretty handy out of the spell portal.
I will call out the Spore Squig on the Fungoid Cave Shaman has actually come useful a few times. So it used to be a 4-up ward. Now it is basically not visible to enemy units more than outside of 12 inches away. So as I'm positioning up the board, especially with my Moon Clan, and maybe I don't want to be hanging around, or even if I do hang around troops, it doesn't matter. Being untargetable for 12-inch outside of 12 has actually been really helpful, especially as like GCs are trying to capture objectives. But yes, I would agree with you. Overall, I would say the reason I take them has gotten less. I don't need them as much as I used to in the old book.
Yeah, for sure.
And also shout out Zach. Thank you so much for the super chat. Fingers crossed the web spinner shaman gets that hero keyword. Yes, that should be fixed. Please fix it. Craziness that there's a couple of those in the book, but I'm sure they'll be errated. Surely.
Yeah. Also, the shout out to the Arachnarok spider with Flinger not having the single keyword. So I'm looking forward to the fact where he's back to being single and ready to mingle. But for now, we can reinforce only the Flinger. You can reinforce. You can take 2 Flingers. But anyway,
there's a couple of things like that. Like you said, we said the Gobblepalooza shouldn't stack. You shouldn't be able to do that. I think Zarbag's Gitz got a really good glow up, because one of my gripes with Zarbag was his spell was within 3 inches. So Zarbag had to be in combat in order to cast his spell and do anything. Now it's actually not too bad. The range has improved and the ability has improved. So I actually wouldn't mind playing with Zarbag's Gitz in a King's Gitz list.
Yeah,
anything you want to call out?
Yeah, his Jealous Hex spell is like amazing. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. It's one of those ones where I kind of like these sorts of spells being in the game, because it's pretty unreliable to get off, because he doesn't have like bonuses to cast or anything. But if he does get it off, it's complete doom for whatever hero he puts it on. It's like you're not doing much in combat anymore most of the time if you don't have buffs, and then you're not getting bonuses to save. So super handy. And I always like these units where it's like you get a hero and then you get some dudes that come with him. I think he still has the situation where he's got a unit of 1 fanatic, which it's just so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Loon Boss is still valuable to me, and I love the change to the command ability. And one more thing I'll say, and then I'll pass the mic over to you, is I never ran the Loon Boss with Giant Cave Squig. I converted mine up as like an Anvil of Apotheosis. I went out and sought out one. So I just got one 2 weeks ago because in my Stabbers build, so when I run Stabbers, it's like 120, 160 somewhere Stabbers. If I'm running a block of 60 and I want to try to get around, not having multiple inspiring presences, I think the Loon Boss on Giant Cave Squig is a good tool to have up my sleeve. Mike's yours.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of him. I've run some occasional meme lists with about 4 of them in there, which is like good fun. Yeah, it's actually pretty good with 30 Squig Hoppers because you can go like, all right, I'm gonna do 43 mortal wounds, and then like let's say you do 8 mortal wounds, you're adding 24 to the bravery of the Squig Hoppers. It's like bravery 28 Squig Hoppers. Now, obviously, that's a bit of a meme, but also he's just really good in combat, like exceptional in combat. And in this GHB is actually good to have these sorts of like handy like combat heroes that are Galatian champions. So
And
yeah,
he
he's
has
pretty good.
7 wounds. He has 7 wounds. It's one of the most
Mm.
durable grot heroes that we have. Yes, the monsters, but he's actually not bad. Could be a good candidate for your general.
Yeah, and his gobbled up ability is heaps of fun. It's just equal or greater than the wounds characteristic. So basically, his Squig is better at eating things than Gargants are putting things in bags. So rub that into your Gargants players that you know locally. This is just a better version of the same rule. It's super handy. Like I think you can actually for example, you're in combat against like your Trog style unit, 4 up, kill a Trog. It's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's quite helpful. And I am your local Gargant player as well, so I won't take that to heart. But the Loon Boss on Giant Cave Squig, funnily enough, good rules. You can't buy it on the GW website. It's actually doesn't exist. So who knows what's going on there. But the Loon Boss I was really happy to see because again, you want to run the mortals on 6s, but that would conflict with all out attack. And it always goes back to the debate with Stabbers. Do you have swords? Do you have spears? Spears hit on 5s, swords hit on 4s. So I would every day of the week put swords because then I'm hitting on 3s and I've still got a decent wound. Hitting on 5s with the Loon Boss just makes no sense. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the big change with this guy is that his ability now works on Squigs. So the thing with it is so it doesn't work on Squig Herd, right? Because we said before they can't receive commands. So the Loon Boss is more for your Boingrots or your Squig Hoppers to give them +1 to hit, and then another sources of mortals. So your Squig Hoppers can have 6s to hit, do mortals from your Squig Boss, and then 6s to wound, doing mortals from your Loon Boss. You can be on a situation where, let's say you've got Gobblepalooza +1 Rend and Moonface Moment. You basically Rend 3 on your Squigs, and you could have 5 attacks if you get the Snuffles off. So if you got those buffs, 10 Hoppers kills 10 Chosen in 1 activation. So this kind of buff unit, you can really see how it stacks up with all the buffs that we've mentioned earlier. It's like really good. Yeah.
I think it's worth calling out as well. I'll call out Aussie's comment here. A tiny Squig devouring a Varangard. I want to see that. If that happens, I want you to take a photo, send it to me. That's 24 karat gold. But the Moon Boss ability, I never actually thought about that until last weekend because I normally just put it on Stabbers. Like that's normally my thing. Stabbers run around doing mortals on 6s, but being able to do it on Boingrots and Hoppers, who have a lot of attacks, is really helpful. Yeah, that's great. And again, if you can put it on your general, you've got an extended range. It's easier to catch up and give that buff out too.
Yeah, he's definitely he definitely requires being the general, I think, because 12-inch range and 18-inch range is a pretty big difference. It used to actually be 24 when he was the general, which was amazing. But still really good. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Anything else you'd want to say with the Moon Clan, these 3?
No, I think we covered most of it. Yeah.
Talk the Squig Boss. All right, so we talked Gobblepalooza already. Let's be honest, it's a double caster. It's ridiculous. You can pick a spell lore, which is helpful. In addition, they have 1 of 3 abilities that are automatic, and we might as well not read the others because everyone uses the poisoned. What's it called? It just basically adds rend -1 extra. So at the moment, you can currently stack it. it won't end like that. So please don't go buy multiple Gobblepaloozas, even though you can't. They've been sold out for ages. But why else do you like the Gobblepalooza?
These are quite interesting. So day one, I went out in TTS and played 4 of them. I was basically playing 4 Gobblepaloozas and then 60 shooters and 30 Squig Hoppers. And that was ridiculous. Because not only is the +1 to rend really good, the +1 to run and charge on Hoppers is actually really good because they do actually run and charge. So you're getting the double benefit there. So I was often going like +2 rend and then +2 run and charge. And then yeeting them up the board. Now, I'm assuming that's not going to stay on. So we're probably only going to be able to have like one of the buffs, or maybe not be able to stack the same buff more than once. And in that case, I think basically, although you can take multiple of these, you probably are going to settle on taking one of them. Because the wizards lose value after the first unit because, you've already got your spell lore covered by Scragrot. So most of what they're casting is their own spells. So if you've already got a unit of Gobblepalooza, your second unit of Gobblepalooza, unless you've got endless spells, doesn't really have that much to do. So, and actually, I think even at the moment, I think 1 is probably the best, even though you can stack the stuff. Just because other than that, they don't really do anything on the board. They're terrible in combat. And which is a shame because Scaremonger used to be like an absolute Chad in combat, and now he's gone down to 1 attack. He used to be 4 attacks, 4s and 3s, neg1, d3. Just like I would just send him around on like little solo missions. He was amazing, but he's down to 1 attack now. Yeah,
I tell you what I found really valuable from the Gobblepalooza, the Mesmerize spell from Boggle Eye. It's 12-inch range, so it's a little bit short. But being able to stop my opponent issuing or receiving commands on 1 unit until my next hero phase, protecting myself from the double. If I'm going to charge in with, my Boy and Grots or whatever it might be into that tanky hero, being able to stop the all-out defense, which is really another source of Rend -1 if I can't do that. Obviously, they can still finest hour, but that requires hindsight. I like that spell. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and the other spell, which is Fungoid Cloud from the Shrewmancer, is a really great spell. But as we were saying before, we kind of already have -1 to hit. So this is an awesome spell. Like it's the same as the Firebelly spell from Ogre Moor Tribes. But yeah, it can be kind of nice to get -2 to hit. So even if your opponent puts on all out attack, there's still -1 to hit. But it's not completely game breaking or anything.
Or it could be helpful if you're not taking your stabbers or other minuses, right? Like if you're running a Trog build, these would be really helpful with your Trog builds.
Yeah,
but I've already got like an industrial amount of netters and minuses to hit here and there that I don't need another one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
One call out with the stabbers is I'm going to call out the obvious one, which is it can contest objectives outside of within 9 inches as opposed to traditionally the 6 when there's 20 or more models. So for me, I reinforced my stabbers so it was a unit of 40, so I could guarantee that benefit. But I found it really valuable, right? In one particular game against an Iron Jaws player who was going to charge up the board, I could still hold an objective and tag it outside of 9 to make his charger just so much harder. But at the same time, as I'm advancing up the board or maybe something's holding an objective, I can move those stabbers up and claim it, even though I'd have to be in combat normally with another unit. What are your thoughts on stabbers?
So the stabbers are good, but they've become, I would say, rather a boring unit in that they don't really do much damage. So the main use of these guys now is like holding objectives. It's just bums on seats basically. So what Kosh is saying about reinforcing it is definitely true because if you're running just 20 and you lose one guy, then you don't get to contest within 9 anymore. The one way you could wrangle using 20 is you kind of use them as like additional bodies on the objective behind your front line. So you have like a front line of like, let's say like 9 rock guts or something, and you're sticking these guys behind the rock guts. So then your rock guts are on the objective and they only count as 6, but you've got like your little contingent of stabbers, 20 stabbers that count as 20. You just stick them behind your rock guts. They're protected, but they still count for the objective. So that can be used for these as well. But more often than not, I'm taking the shooters if I'm taking
Well,
the Moon Clan
that was
lads.
that was the segue here. Shooters are superior to stabbers. Now, I had this issue because this list that I submitted, as you said, I had 40 stabbers, and I originally was going to do 40 shooters. And one, they're not all painted, so I'm like, I'm going to go with what's fully painted already. But two, I wanted to try that 9-inch contesting objectives. And you're right. I think I was underwhelmed with the amount of damage. So I was not a fan. Like they're the anvil. They sit there, they take damage, the -1, they rally back on 4-ups. They're objective holders. They are screens. They're not damage dealers. Talk to me about shooters, and would you agree that shooters are superior to stabbers?
Yeah, I think in general that the shooters are better than stabbers. I think the main thing is with shooters is just how cheap they are relative to the output. Like it's 125 points for 40 shots. It is 4s and 5s, but like with 20-inch range, you're just doing like a good amount of chip damage. Which is all you kind of need to do to justify taking this sort of unit, because most of what it's going to be used for is like a screen or like clogging up the board. As I was saying before, it's not the most interesting unit to play with, and the stabbers are not either, but it's just very effective. Like, board control, objective control, shooting off screens. It's kind of everything you want with this sort of unit.
Yeah, and they come with the nets as well. So if you want that defensive, and the cool thing is the nets have changed, so it's not measuring the models within 2 inches of a net get -1 to hit. It's now just when you're in combat with a unit with a net, it's -1. So you realistically, if you're going to run a Moon Clan shooters list, you have one net. So everyone's -1, and then you have everyone else with a bow, because you used to always max out your nets. You'd always use your 3 in every 20.
Yeah, I was joking the other day because I was playing against Stormcast, and I got given first turn, and he had a lot of stuff off the board. So I teleported 60 shooters and basically lined them up across the entire board so he could only deploy in his deployment zone. And I had one net. Like all the way at the back of the board, and now it works that that net, he's just like doing pass the parcel all the way down the line to the other guy 60 inches across the board, because he also gets the net benefit, even though they're so far away. It's funny.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Would you always take a unit of Gobbapalooza to support your shooters, or do you think they're good enough without the Rend -1 poison, whatever, the potion?
Actually, in one of the main tournaments I'm doing at TTS at the moment, I actually don't have Gobbapalooza, and I have a unit of 60 of these. Because what I'm more using them for, if I have 30 hoppers in the same list, is just clogging up the board, shooting off screens. And you kind of don't need Gobbapalooza to do that. And the difficulty with Gobbapalooza is I have to be wholly within 12, which if I'm trying to spread the shooters across the entire board to like clog up the space, I can't really do that. Now, the value of spreading the shooters across the whole board, like literally at the start of the game in your deployment zone, you just set up a front line of shooters across your entire front line. Is that because they have the 4-up rally, if you're spreading across the board, you can always like kind of pick where you're going to be. Like, let's say they go in and they kill like 55 shooters. You go like, I want to be over here now. And you remove all your stuff, and you have like a little contingent of 5 shooters left. And then you're rolling 55 dice. You're going to get like 27 shooters back. And then in your turn, you can do Hanna Gork and spread them across the board again. And we're back to where we were. So, super filthy unit, yeah, but just kind of not sexy in a certain way, yeah.
See, so I guess the point you're making here is you're not treating your shooters like a Lumineth castle, right? You're not bunching them all up together and trying to like just block out the sun. You're using them, 25 mil bases. You can clog up the board, just have little bow tags at the end when you're, stringing them all out, and you that's how you're using them, as opposed to, again, the shooty castle.
Yeah,
I mean, you can if you want to, but it's not probably the
yes.
most effective of your investment.
Yeah, I think it's they can be used in a variety of different ways, I would say.
Yeah, and that's and for 125 and counting as your battle line, and those no Galatian veterans and bounty hunters to worry about at the moment, they're a great option. They're a really good option, and you get 20 for every 125. So the points is just, it's very cheap.
Yeah, I think the next three we've mostly talked about it. Just we would be remiss not to talk about the Fanatics getting 3-inch range. Like, cannot be overstated how happy I'm about that. Because 1-inch range in the old book drove me insane. It's just like you'd set them up behind the line, your opponent go, "Yeah, I'm just not going to get within 1-inch." Yeah.
I will say as well that I'm happy that the Loon Smasher Fanatics and the Spore Splatter lost the splat rule. For anyone who doesn't know what splat was, when you roll your charge, if you rolled a double, so double one, double six, double four, they would take damage. So they would like entangle themselves as they're swinging around their boulders. So that is still good. They're still susceptible to stomp, which makes me cry a little bit. But just be smarter with where you go for your Fanatics.
Yeah, because of Stomp, I've kind of moved towards taking these in units of 10 than rather than 5. Now the 5 is I think more points efficient if you're not worried about versing monsters and stuff, but I like not having to worry about that kind of thing. I like having like a unit that I know can go in and kill a monster. So if you have 10, even if you're losing 3 to the Stomp, the 7 should still murder whatever's there. Like 7 Fanatics is amazing. Yeah, I find the 10 is better. But I have also run 5 a lot. And 5 can be good. Like, let's say in your Grimrack's Loon Court unit of like 6 dudes, I like having just a cheeky 5 unit of Fanatics in there to kind of just challenge stuff that's going to come into you. So super good. They're only 110 points, so like super cheap for what they do.
Yeah, my problem is I'm running out of reinforcement points.
Yes.
When you're double reinforcing or single reinforcing those shooters or stabbers, you have a squig herd, or what you do is your hoppers. There's another 2 points. It's like you can only reinforce so many, and unfortunately for me, I don't have the points to reinforce into a unit of Fanatics unless they are my focused destruction piece.
Yeah, so I think the main thing that's going to take reinforcement points that feels like it's a little bit of a tax is Boingrots because they're 5s.
Yes.
So as soon as you got Boingrots, I don't think you're taking units of 10 Fanatics. That's the way in my head it works. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll show you my list a little bit later, but Squigs, Mangler Squig. I've already talked about some of my crying. Like I truly cry because it's a great unit. It's gotten more consistent. It had some extra wounds. The ball and chain has improved. There's a whole bunch of cool improvements, but it is expensive. Where do you stand on the Mangler Squig, the Loon Boss Mangler Squig specifically?
Yeah, so I think so the +1 to wound buff is really good because it's not something we can access anywhere else in the army. And that was the main thing I was using it before in the old book, is that +1 to wound aura. Now it's once per game, which feels like a little bit of a rough nerf. And you would actually use it more than once per game. Like some buffs, like sometimes with the Loon Boss in this book, I find myself only using it for like one key turn, really. But this one is one that you would use all the time because it's an aura. Now, there's some benefits to it not being a command ability, namely that you can use it on Squig Herd, right? It's one of like the few buffs that they can receive, so that's pretty good. But the problem with this unit, which has always been the problem, is it's just too weak to shooting. Like 14 wounds with a 4-up save. It's at that zone where it can die to all sorts of things from shooting. Like Sentinels can murder it off, Iron Drakes, Reavers, like any shooting unit you can imagine in the game is really good at handling this unit. And as a general, you don't really want him to just die. So that's where I'm at on the Loon Boss and Mangler Squig. And I also think at 370, it's just a bit too much of a hole in the army's points, right?
So where I'm currently at, and I've been talking to a few people, just kind of like list crack theorying, right? So 370 is the Loon Boss on Mangler. For an extra 100 odd points, I can get myself a Mega Gargant.
Yeah,
which can smash, and it has way more wounds. Now, obviously, that it has no mushroom. There's certain things it doesn't have, right? But if I want that real kill piece, I could either go into Kragnos, get more points to get Craggy in there, which would synergize nicely with Boingrots and Hoppers, getting 3d6 charges and things like that. I could go the I don't want to say it, the Incarnate of Gur, another kill piece that has a bit more durability. I could go Mega Gargant. I could go to what you had, which is the Trog, or I can put those 400 points into more hoppers, more squigs, more bodies, more things. So I haven't got a conclusion just yet, but it does make me wonder if because I didn't run Sneaky Snufflers. I had a choice of Sneaky Snufflers versus Gobbapalooza. I chose Gobbapalooza. I think I chose wrongly. I think I'd much rather the Sneaky Snufflers, and I'd like to see how this unit works with a 5-up ward, because then it's much more durable.
Yeah, I think the only problem with doing that is then it becomes like basically 480 points, which is kind of a lot, right? Goldpalooza is pretty good on this one though, because you can give it like +1 to hit and wound, right? Which is like great. So from the Brugit dude, so that's pretty handy.
I use it on my herd. Like I use it on my herd.
That's the problem,
the
right?
volume.
Yeah. That's the problem. It's like if you sit down and do the math, it's like any equivalent points of this guy in any battle line squig unit is going to be better. The non-hero one, the Mangler Squig, I'm more of a fan of because it can kind of like lean more into the like yeet and delete kind of play style. Like you can really send it in and just do the boing, move 3d6 and just hit something that you need to kill. And it's, aside from shooters, like one of the only ways that squigs can kind of get to something in the back line. So that can be pretty good. The other thing that's big about the Mangler Squig is it takes up a behemoth slot. So if you're trying to be 1-drop, this is like one of the only ways to do it, because our army is so cheap in terms of points. You actually you struggle to fit 2,000 points into a 1-drop. I remember like one of the first lists I was running was like 1865 points because like I wanted the Triumph and I was like, well, I still want to be 1-drop. And I was like, I think I'm kind of okay with playing 130 points down. So yeah. But then later I put in the Malevolent move in the spell. But anyway, this one's pretty good for 1-drop. I probably wouldn't run it otherwise, but yeah, it's pretty good. It's much cheaper than the Loon Boss.
Yeah, it's much cheaper. And obviously, you don't get the +1 to wound bubble once per game, but I guess it's like how important that is. And obviously, you can't get fight another day. So I'm going to test the Mangler Squig and scale it back a little. I think there might be some play there, but the Loon Boss on Mangler is a little bit too expensive for me. The Loon Boss on Giant Cave Squig, I thought it might be a nice little 1-2 punch with Boingrots. I haven't pulled the trigger on that just yet. Specifically because of the Let's Go Bouncing rule. So in the combat phase, you can pick one friendly Boingrot unit that hasn't fought. So if you charge the Boingrot and the Giant Cave Squig together, you hit with the Giant Cave Squig first, and then you immediately fight with the Boingrots. And then obviously on the charge, the Boingrots do mortals on 4-up. So, but I haven't pulled the trigger on it just yet because I thought, could I switch it out? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of reluctant to say that it's bad because I don't actually think it is bad. It's just it's situated in a book where there's so much good stuff. And so having like a unit like this that's just like it's like a pretty good war scroll. It's good for taking like some gear on it. Like I actually think that Fight Another Day on this guy's pretty good. Because you just like send him in, hit something, make the Boingrots fight, and then like retreat. It's pretty good. Yeah, but it's just not quite as like synergistic as you'd want with some of the heroes. Like it's just for that Boingrots thing. And all of that Let's Get Bouncing thing really does is just lets him fight without costing you like an activation. So it's more for him than the Boingrots. So it's just okay, I think.
Yeah, that's where I've kind of landed. I'm like, do I really need it? Well, the Boingrots can issue commands and do their thing by themselves. Obviously, the Squig Boss works really well with the Squig Herd. Hopefully, this would work well with the Boingrot. I'm not sold just yet. But chat, let me know if you found a combination. I haven't seen it just yet on how I could maximize the Boingrot and Giant Cave Squig combo.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Let's talk about your baby boys, the hoppers.
The hoppers.
Now let me just put this caveat down. I built my hoppers as a unit of 5 back in the day where they were units of 5. And the only reason at that point in time, back into 2019, was I'm like, I want a cheap screen like I used to use the Ripper Snarlfang. They're cheap, they're fast, they can go steal objectives, they can go annoy people, and they don't cost me a lot of points. They got changed to they're now units of 10, the big block of 20 wounds. and you can double reinforce them as Stuart likes to do it. What's so good about them, and how did that help you get 4 and 1?
Okay, so I've played an absolute ridiculous amount of games with this unit, because it kind of it started off as a meme, because I remember when the old so the GHP previous and now started out, I was like, I just kind of worked out you could double reinforce them with 4 at rally, and I'm like, yeah, but they're bravery 4, so like, isn't that a problem? As it turns out, it's actually not as much of a problem as you would think. Yeah, and actually, as I was saying before, it can be kind of a benefit if you're trying to get outside of combat. The big thing with this unit that makes them unique in this book is that you can take 60 wounds of them, which you can with stabbers and shooters, but they have the benefit of also being mobile. And that means you can string them across the board. So you can send them into your opponent, and then at the same time, kind of bring the back half of the unit back into your deployment. You can fight up there, take a hit, then remove models back to where you are in deployment, and then safely rally them. And because you're mobile, you can send them back in. The problem with the stabbers and the shooters is because they're very slow. If you're like rallying them back in your deployment zone, it can kind of take them out of the game for a couple turns. But the hoppers, that doesn't happen.
Can I just quickly acknowledge your comment in the chat? And Frog Mob is actually 100% correct. Just I want to talk about a throwaway comment that you made that is not quite true, and it doesn't matter. So when we talked about the shooters, and you die, 55 of them die, and there's only 5 remaining. Yes, when you bring back models, they have to return within 1 inch of a model that is not being returned. So yes, in a literal sense, you can't do what we talked about. Not quite true.
Actually, you can with the shooters. And so if you space them properly, so they're an inch apart. The thing is, because they're 25mm bases, you can basically return models in 2 ranks. So because of that, you should be able to fit something like that around the shooters. Yeah.
What I was going to say is what you need to do. So depending on how you've set it up and how you've pulled out, as long as you remain coherent, having 1 model within 1 inch, then because of the 25mm base, you can do 2, maybe not 55, but it definitely can return a lot if you play smart and you position well. So, but if you clump them up like this, probably not.
No, like if you have them in like a single cell of 5, it's going to be too hard. But yeah, I promise you, I've had enough games on this. Like you definitely can rally more than you think you can, even with the hoppers, as long as you've done it right at the back. Yeah.
So talk more about the hoppers, right? So why would you reinforce hoppers? Because, if I look at hoppers versus Boingrots, I'm like, well, I'll do Boingrots. They have a 4-up save. They do mortals on the charge. They do more damage in combat. Like, what's the sell on hoppers?
Yeah, so I think the 4-up rally is the sell. Because with the Boingrots, let's say you lose 10, you're only rolling 5 dice. You might get 5 back, and you're only up to 10. So that's the big sell. But there are so many factors that go into this. So the original reason I started playing the hoppers was because they were the only unit in the army that could be 60 wounds and not be bounty huntable. Okay, so back in the old book, if you wanted to run 60 wounds, you're looking at this or stabbers or shooters, but they would get, double damage against them. So hoppers were the most durable thing. Now I was worried that hoppers would be a little bit doomed this season because, they're not, the bounty hunters benefits gone a little bit. So if I was comparing, like if it was still the old book and we were comparing shooters and hoppers now, I would be leaning much more towards shooters, with the old damage buffs and such. But the thing that's come up now is the 5-up ward. Okay. So, what I was saying before about the relationship between wounds and a ward save, the 5-up ward is more valuable on the hoppers than it is on the bounders, because you have 60 wounds as opposed to 30 wounds. And I also think that a 4-up save has value until you face rend, right? Like if your opponent's rend 3 and you're sitting there with Squig hoppers, it's like, well, I have an 8+ save. I don't really care. Like, I didn't have 1 to begin with. But with the bounders, you've gone from, basically 30 wounds of 4-up save to just like 30 wounds with no save, which is the same thing the hoppers have, right? So in that situation, when your opponent has rend 3, 15 Boingrots is exactly half as durable as 30 hoppers. Okay. and it's only like I think it's like 100 points cheaper. So yeah, there's like a number of factors here. The 5-up ward, the number of wounds.
The 5-up, by the way, is Snufflers. If anyone hasn't connected dots
Yes.
just yet, so
Yeah.
Squig Hoppers don't natively have a 5-up ward. We are buffing them up with Squig Hoppers. So with sneaky Snufflers.
Yeah, so the ward and then the rally, and just the way all those things work together. You know, the other thing to consider is like the massive footprint of the unit, which makes it much easier to string back into buffs. So realistically, you can like send them in and then be within 3 of Grimrack, the Underworld's warband, which gives pile in if he's within pile in on death if you're within 3 of them. You can string back to him mega easy. You can string back to be in a situation where the Squig Boss can still buff him again on your turn. You can string back to be where the Snufflers can still buff them, where Scragrot can be wholly within 12 to make sure they can rally. There's all sorts of things that in this army, it's benefit to string backwards. So compared to Boingrots, this is more of a repeatedly buffable unit. I would say Boingrots are more like, if we look at Stormcast, if you look at Fulminators, they kind of have a similar role to Boingrots in my mind. Like their damage gets a lot better on the charge. And 15 Boingrots fully buffed will delete absolutely anything in this game. Like the damage that 15 Boingrots do now, with 6s to hit doing mortals, 6s to wound doing mortals, and bonus rend. Like if they have +1 rend from Gobapalooza, the Lancers are rend 3, damage 2 on the charge. And it just murder anything. Yeah.
Yeah, your hoppers. So what you're doing, a couple of other call outs is the speed on a Squig Hopper is just incredible. D6 plus, 10 plus D6. And then if you're under the light of the bad moon, you can run and charge. So you might apply a command point to get another 6. And then you've obviously got the charge as well. So straight up, that speed is just insanity. But the other thing as well is the amount of mortal wounds. So when your Boingrots charge on a 4-up, they do a mortal wound. A Boingrot unit comes in 5s, right? So if you reinforce them, that's 10 dice. If you reinforce a unit of Squig Hoppers, which is now 20, you are statistically more likely to do more mortal wounds from Squig Hoppers than you would Boingrots. Now, Boingrots do more damage with their bites and their lance attacks, especially the lance attacks. So you're doing more damage in combat, but you're doing more mortals from the Squig Hoppers. And like, would you Mystic Shield them on Squig Hoppers? I mean, I guess it depends on who I'm going into. If they've only got Rend -1, maybe. But with Mystic Shield being short range, I guess, I mean, Boingrots gives you more value. But I guess it depends on, like, I think, again, if they got Rend -2 and they've got a 6-up save, it's like, it's still not even worth it.
Yeah, in the old book, I would have Mystic Shielded them more now, but because we have the Loon Boss buff, right, which is for like all-out attack and mortals, I find when I'm like piling on death, I want to put that on. So usually on my opponent's turn, instead of doing all-out defense, I'm just waiting, and then when I start piling on death, I use that all-out attack ability from the Loon Boss, and then we do more damage. So because of that, because we're not also using all-out defense, I find Mystic Shield rarely goes on this unit. I tend to either not cast Mystic Shield or I chuck it on the Boingrots, because the Boingrots with a 4-up save are a great recipient of it. Yeah,
that's where, compared to those two units, my Boingrot's going. But if I've got the Mangler, I'm putting on my Mangler just to keep it around a little longer.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I just want to say with the movement change, it's obviously great for hoppers, but I think it's even better for the bounders, because like 3d6 was unreliable, but 2d6 was unbelievably unreliable. like it could go either way with 2d6. So going to d6 +7 makes the Boingrots like way more reliable to play with. Because believe it or not, with the hoppers with 3d6, I wouldn't say it actually lost me many games rolling low, because even if you roll low, you probably roll like 6, and then you can run them 6, and they're still moving 12 inches, right? So with them, it was less of an issue. With the Boingrots, where if you roll a double 1 or whatever, they're really just stuck. It's just a big problem. Yeah.
I think I caught out my opponents just on the speed that these are. I mean, obviously, I told them what they can do and things like that, but I think all 5 of my opponents were just amazed how fast this army is. And then when you add the mortal wounds from various ways and the rend and the extra attacks, they're just a great mobile army. And we know Age of Sigmar is won through movement, not necessarily through damage or combat. So having those tools, even if I've got a couple of squig hoppers, they can threaten objectives, they can jump over screens, they could be doing things throughout the game that normally like one or two idiots wouldn't do anything, but they do stuff.
Yeah. Now the big difference between these two units is like the way that the mortal wounds work. So with hoppers, it's like basically in the movement phase with normal move, run, or retreat, and the Boyingrots is when they charge. The hoppers version is better at dealing with screens. So if your opponent chucks a screen up, you can just like yeet over the screen, come back, delete the screen, and then charge to whatever's behind them. The problem with the Boyingrots one I find is that because the squigs are still 1-inch reach, if your opponent like removes some stuff at the front, you can kind of deny yourself some attacks, whereas the hoppers really don't have that problem. That's the only problem I found with the Boyingrots.
Yeah, I found that happen a few times actually, where because of the mortal wounds, I removed myself from certain combats, which is why probably I wouldn't go any more than a unit of 10. Just because a unit of 15, I lose too many attacks with the range.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
We've already talked Squig Herd, mate, and like they're just incredible. Like they just do 3 attacks each, Ren 1, damage 1. They do mortal wounds, a bravery of 3. So every time one of them runs away on a 2-up, you can pick an enemy unit within 9 inches, which is an extension. And it used to be you had to pick the closest unit within 6. So being able to like just delete support heroes or things that you weren't even in combat with if they're within 9 is wonderful. The other thing I want to call out, and I really enjoyed this rule, is the way that you can bring back squigs. So you can't rally them, but two in every 10 squig herd is a herder. And in your hero phase, you can roll a dice for each of your herders. On a roll of a 1, the herder is dead. On a roll of a 2+, you can return D3 squigs back. Squigs are 2 wounds each. So with me, I double reinforced mine. So I had 6 herders. I was easily bringing back 10 squigs a turn. And because it's not a rally, I couldn't care less if I'm in combat. No issue. Just keep coming back.
There is an interaction with this unit, which will obviously be fact, which is that when you remove models from coherency, they count as fleeing.
So I've seen.
Yep. Now I was doing that for a whole 6 months apparently, and apparently that should have been fact, but
yeah, I've seen some house rules at tournaments already coming in saying that fleeing models don't trigger that ability. So don't be a cheese merchant, folks. Just because we'll get nerfed to the sun if we keep doing this.
There's no way that's going to be allowed, because the other thing with the herding squigs rule, right, is it doesn't say you can't roll it if there's no dead squigs. So there's ways to guarantee that you're going to roll a battle shock if you have 6 of them and you're just rolling 6 dice, probably one of them's going to die. So you can guarantee that you're going to have one model dead for battle shocks. If you want to do some like sneaky mortal wounds, do something at the back, that might be a cute little play to get some more units, more models in the unit dead, right? Yeah.
Don't do that. But Squig Herd are great. They battle line. If you conditional battle line, they slap. Double reinforced unit, 72 wounds that I can keep regenerating. They're just incredible.
120 points. It's pretty good.
I get the feeling their points are either going to increase, or I think their points have got to go up. Unfortunately, they're just too good. The other ones, is there anything you'd want to say? Like Ripper Snarlfangs, for me, their points went up and they're now unattractive to me. If I want that cheap unit that's going to go cap objectives, I'd probably go to unit of 5 Spider Riders. Rippers, the Snarlfang Riders, for me, don't do enough, so I probably wouldn't go that. But the Ale Guzzler Gargant having a 3d6 charge now, and being able to charge within 18 inches as opposed to 12 makes and it doesn't have the stumble now, so you have to roll 3 triples, which I don't know the maths, but statistically very unlikely. Has me reconsidering the Ale Guzzler Gargant. What's your thoughts on the 3 here on the screen?
We've been calling the Gargant, we've been calling this in the Chaos Gargant like expat Gargants, like Gargants that have gone to work in like a lower tax zone or something to try and make some money. Because like for some reason they just have some extra rules that makes them better than a Man Crusher Gargant. This one's pretty good. I think the Chaos Gargant's a little bit better than this one, but he's like, with the -1 save order, right? Yeah, he's pretty good though. like, yeah, again, if you're kind of trying to fit into one drop, this sort of behemoth slot can be pretty handy for making sure you fit in there. So I think for taking basically a raw bot that has 36 charge, it's pretty good. Like, yeah, I don't think it's awful or anything. The 2 wolf units, which have some of the best models in the army, are just a bit overpriced. Which is a really big shame because I love both the models. But anyway,
Yeah,
hopefully it'll go down.
Every list
Yeah.
in my old book would always have the Ripper Snarlfang. I always start with Ripper Snarlfang. It was a must include. Now it's just too expensive for me. One thing I want to talk about with the endless spells, and then we go into lists, is people in my Discord are obsessed with the Scuttle Tide. Now, where are you at with Scuttle Tide? Because it was I used to run it back in the day where it used to block your movement. So back before you could move through endless spells, I used to love this because I would annoy the crap and block my opponent in their in their zone, and would just keep triggering it. For me, I love the Malevolent Moon. I'm not a big fan of the Arachna Cauldron, and Mork's Mighty Mushroom is now too expensive for me again. Like it was okay. And now that we're moving into a meta where I'd actually like to use the mushroom, the price is too expensive. And I'm like, no. Where are you at with your endless spells?
So just to quickly address the mushroom. So this thing has had a bit of a traumatic past. It's gone from like 80 points to 100 points down to 40 points, and now it's 100 points. And all of those times, I don't think the War Scrolls really changed. It's just been like the same, but the points just all over the place. Like
the War Scrolls never changed.
It's bizarre. Yeah, now it's way too expensive at 100 again. I think all of these endless spells, with the exception of the Cauldron, because you can't do it, but they're all kind of priced for Loon Skin. Like, yeah, they're kind of taken with the mind that you're going to get one of them for free, probably. Because I don't think any of these 3 are like the Scuttle Tide, Moon, and Shroom are really worth the points. If you're not taking Loon Skin. Yeah, the Cauldron, to address that, is it's just gotten like worse. Like 1 additional spell's not as good as rerolling casts and unbinds. And now knowing the entire Moon Clan lore is kind of irrelevant because it's only 4 spells now, and Scraggot already knows the whole lore anyway. So I really don't understand the use for this. So the 2 best ones are definitely Scuttle Tide and the Malevolent Moon for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
So the Moon, I would say the main use for this is for getting like run and charge on the Squigs is probably the main thing you'd use it for. Like for your Squig Herd Alpha or your Squig Herd or your Squig Hopper Alpha, this thing's really useful. And then the Scuttle Tide, yeah, I think you kind of need some other way to do AoE mortals to make this thing worth it. Because like chip damage in this edition of Age of Sigmar, it's just not as valuable unless you got other things to combo with, because, you know, everything has rally and everything has like heroic recovery for healing. So we're not in a game anymore where it used to be like doing a couple wounds to a Stonehorn or something has some like real long-term value. Now it's just going to get healed. So unless you're pairing the Scuttle Tide with some other like mortal wound output, I don't think it's necessarily worth the points. So for me, the best one here is probably the Malevolent Moon. Yeah.
Yeah, Scuttle Tide has some good ideas, but where I want to use the Scuttle Tide, I lose. Like, I want to hit the castles. I want to hit those magical castles. I want to hit Tzeentch. I want to hit Lumineth. I want to hit those types of armies. And they're the ones that are most likely going to unbind this with ease. So for the points, I think if Scuttle Tide had dropped a little, I'd be a buyer. I think it used to be back in the day like 40, 50 points. And I'm like, okay, I could see value in that. But now that it's much higher, I'm like, yeah, nah.
Yeah, you cost like 40 points in block movement, and you could take it in armies outside of Gitz.
And
I remember taking it in Ogres. Yeah.
Oh, and you get +1 to cast from the web Spinner Shaman, which was lovely. There's a lot of cool things you could do with it. Look, if you got the points, I think the challenge for me is if I've got the points to spend on Scuttle Tide, I'd rather go for the automatic Triumph. Because I think we've seen very quickly the importance of having a Triumph, and actually going to Stuart's list, you can see here that you've actually gone double Triumph. So you just see why you want to drop those points. And I'd rather not have that situational endless spell and guarantee myself that Triumph as opposed to hope and pray.
Yeah, so I think my stance on the double Triumph in general is if you're playing a singles format, I think it's kind of required because you just don't know what you're going to face. But if you're playing a teams format where you can dodge Horrorghast and Lumineth and the nasty stuff, then you can probably go 2-drop. But both the lists we're going to talk about today are singles lists. I'm taking this in a singles tournament. It would be very different if I took it in a teams tournament. So yeah, we have double Indomitable Triumph. So what makes this Triumph so good in this army is we can roll the Battle Shock first and then use the Triumph. So it's really handy for units like Sneaky Snufflers, where, once I lose 3 Snufflers, there's a danger that the rest of them run. But because I've got the 2 Triumphs in the back, I can always take the risk on just rolling like the 1 or 2 to keep them there. And if I happen to roll a 6, I just say, we're going to burn one of the Triumphs. I keep my Snufflers there. So not only is it handy for the big units, but these sorts of like small units where I would really like to keep 1 there so I can roll a rally. Like even Gobbapalooza, right? Like I want to keep 1 there so I can roll a rally on them. It can be super handy for that. Yeah. So this list has a lot of interesting, weird stuff going on. It's more of like a collector style list that has like some strong stuff in there. I don't think it's like optimal, but it's like gonna do, I think, super well. So the main kind of damage that you've got is the 30 Squig Hoppers. And the synergy pieces around that are really the pile in on death from Grimrack, and then the 6s to hit do mortals from the Squig Boss. This list does not have the Loon Boss in it, because I wanted something else as a general. And I think in most cases, with the buffs from the Squig Boss and the Gobbapalooza, so the +1 rend, and the 5-up ward from the Snufflers, like these hoppers will do enough. I don't think the Loon Boss is like absolutely required, because most of the time you're doing enough damage anyway. So I think that's fine. Yeah,
I might just read out the list really quickly for anyone who's listening later on the podcast. So you've got the Scuttle Boss on Gigantic Spider, who's the general, super nasty Venom, and the Headdress of Many Eyes. You got Grimrack the Great with the Underworld's Warband that goes with it. Scragrot the Loon King, a Squig Boss on Nasha Squig, who's the Aspect of the Champion Tunnel Master for the once per game teleport. You got a unit of 20 shooters, a unit of 40 shooters, and a unit of 20 shooters, a unit of 30 Squig Hoppers, and a unit of 10 Loon Smasher Fanatics, 6 Sneaky Snufflers, 5 Gobbapaloozas, and you've come in at 1950 under Warlord, Battle Regiment, and Galatian Sharpshooters. Warlord obviously getting yourself the extra Triumph as your enhancement.
Yeah, I like so it's 8 drops, which is a lot, but it's kind of at a sweet spot where it's like a little bit lower than your like double Warlord Fire Slayers armies and stuff like that. So anyone, or like double Warlord Nighthaunt. So anyone who's doing that double Warlord kind of play style, you'll still outdrop. And then other than that, I find that you could also be like I think it'd be 6 drop or something with this list. No, 7 drops. If you went like not a Warlord and you went a Command Entourage instead. But I think it's I think it's fine to go a bit higher drop and to have all the benefits, so we can get the once per game extra CP. And we have sharpshooters on the shooters as well. So we have basically 60 shooters that can like threaten the hero. Most of the time I'm shooting a screen with them, but there's a battle plan called Only the Worthy in the current GHB, where basically only if a Galatian champion's on an objective, only they can cap it. And this list only has 1 Galatian champion. So on that battle plan, I really need a way to kill that champion. And so that's why I've put the shooters in sharpshooters, just so I can have a shot at taking that out, so I can actually cap the objective. But then other than that, that is kind of the weakness of this list, is that we've only got 1 Galatian champion. Now the Scuttle Boss is the interesting kind of like cameo in here. So what I was saying before is like, it's one of those units where at 130 points, it's not really worth it. But if you invest a command trait and an artifact, it becomes super worth it. So the command trait it's got, super nasty Venom, doubles the mortal wounds that its mount does. So basically, if you're rolling a 5 or a 6 when you're under the moon, the mount's doing 4 mortal wounds, which is super handy. And then it's also got the Headdress of Many Eyes, where it can only be hit on 5s and 6s. So there are some certain things that are just like, lol, we do mortals on 5s and 6s, like Sentinels. So they don't really care about that. But a lot of like combat stuff, like, even like Chaos Chosen, it kind of hurts them that they can only hit on 5s and 6s. So the main role of this unit is just doing like some mortal wounds, and then kind of like tagging units on the side. Like it's a super taggy unit. You're just tagging them, and because you're only being hit on 5s and 6s, and maybe you've got +1 to save from the Mystic Shield, you can kind of just stand there and be annoying. Yeah.
Reminds me a little bit of the Smash Bat from Feck. Like you just had this independent little missile weapon that just goes off. People ignore it because it's like, oh, what's this little spider idiot gonna do? And then it hits you, and you're like, oh, you slap actually pretty hard. While your shooters and your stabbers and everyone's moving around the board. And do you put your loon smashers in your 20 or your 40 shooters?
I like to keep people guessing about that, because you can also put them in the Grimrack's Loon Court. So there's quite a few options you can do here. I find in the melee matchup, you maybe want to put it in the 20 shooters, because you're okay with the unit dying, right? Like you want the shooters to die to whatever charges them, so you can bring out the fanatics, hit them for free, and then on your turn, you're going to be striking first. So nothing's going to survive 2 hits from 10 Loon Smasher fanatics. So that's what they use for. In a shooting matchup, you're going to want to put them in the 40 Moon Clan. Otherwise, they can shoot the Moon Clan, like the 20 shooters off, and then shoot the fanatics, which is the Doomsday scenario. So, yeah.
And do Moon Clan shooters get +1 to save against ranged attacks like the
Yes,
Netters?
they do.
Yeah, like this.
They're only a 5 up though, so that with the +1, so the stabbers go down to 4 up. But yeah, they might live shooting. Yeah,
still helps. Look, this is a nice mixed arms list. Certainly some interesting combinations. Certainly some different plays, which I really enjoy. The other, like this is your other version, which I thought this is probably more my style, to be honest. And it reminds me a little bit back when like Nathan Prescott and I were all running around with 7 endless spells on the table, going absolute ham. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. You can't do 7 endless spells. We're restricted to 3, but the other one being a bad snatchers. So, by the way, just to remind you, the Jaws of Mork will be +1 attack on the charge for your squigs, which would be primarily your squig hoppers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about this one because I haven't tinkered with bad snatchers as much, and I already said I'm probably not as big of a fan compared to like your King's Gitz, but your bad snatchers with Chasing the Moon, and Chasing the Moon really needs that durable hero general, which the Dankhold Trog boss falls into play. If you're doing the Loon Boss or a Fungoid, no. But you've also got, you got the Loon Skin and the Glowy Howzit, you got Scraggy, you've got the Fungoid Cave Shaman with Hand of Gork, Web Spinner Shaman, Sneaky Distraction, Tunnel Master, Sneaky Snufflers, 60 shooters, 20 shooters, 20 shooters, 5 Gobapalooza twice, 1 having Itch and Nuisance, 1 having Hand of Gork, 10 Fanatics, and then you've got Loon Skin Scuttle Tide for free. And then you've got Umbral Spell Portal Horrorghast at 1915 Double Triumph.
Yeah. So I always liked writing lists that beat my own lists, and this one definitely murders the other list we just talked about. So there's a number of reasons for that. So we've taken Horrorghast in the Gitz list, which I think is some sort of like cannibalism or something. But it's super good for taking out like these big units, which I think otherwise the list would struggle to kill. And yeah, it's sort of more like a Lumineth style castle, but the Gitz version. So the main thing you're looking to do is to buff up the shooters at the moment with +2 Ren from the 2 Gobapaloozas, and then shoot something, and then with the Horrorghast, you basically can battle shock them off. So against the previous list, I'm looking to shoot the 30 hoppers off. 60 shooters should kill like heaps of those, and then the Horrorghast should hopefully get rid of the rest of them. And with the Horrorghast and the Spell Portal, the Horrorghast at the end of the hero phase when it moves can elect to go through the Spell Portal and then be set up. So it basically has like a massive amount of range. So there's no real way that the Squig Hoppers can hide. And of course, with the shooters, I can just use Hand of Gork and teleport them up. So from the previous list perspective, there's almost no counterplay to this just taking off 30 hoppers turn 1. So, I think it's really handy. And the reason I've gone 1915, I think if you're going to take Horrorghast in the current meta, you're really looking to have like a ridiculous Triumph bid. Because in order to make the Horrorghast really useful, you need to make sure your opponent doesn't have the Indomitable Triumph. So you're going to need to also go for your own Triumph. So if you're doing that, you're going to want to write a list that really gets some value out of taking the Triumph. Maybe you want to take 2 Triumphs, or you want to take like a shooting unit that otherwise has no access to +1 to wound, which is like shooters, right? Like the Inspired changes them from 5s to 4s, which is a big deal. Yeah. So there are other armies in the game that can do something similar to this, but yeah, this is an interesting list. It's basically like a gunline Gitz list. We were talking about the shooters before, about like spreading across the board and using them for board control. This is more like you stand in a big blob and like shoot kind of style of shooters use. It's not really the board control. We're looking to like shoot something off and then horror ghast off the rest of the unit. That's the plan.
Would you go for something like Purple Sun just to get the extra -1 rend somewhere? And it's like even more pew pew?
You could take out, if you're going to do that, you would probably take out Scuttle Tide, and then chuck in Purple Sun. So you have Spell Portal, Horrorghast, and Purple Sun. Because usually the Horrorghast, even if you don't chuck it through the Spell Portal, can often get in range. So you'd be chucking the Purple Sun through the Spell Portal, and then popping it out the other side, just within 6 for the -1 to save.
Yeah, obviously you'd have to pay the points for it because you can't get Purple Sun for free. But but the concept would be, if you're super investing in that, getting the extra rend on the shoot. Even like the Gobblepaloozas don't stack. The rend -1 from the shooters, another rend -1 from the Purple Sun. That's rend -2, 120 shots from those 60 shooters. Oh, equivalent. Obviously, there's netters in there, but and also shout out. We've also had someone draw up the CAD around returning models, and it looks like according to the CAD, you can bring back 30 models. So thanks for the validation. Yeah, with some tweaking and some like board positioning and being smart, yeah, you can maximize it. If you got them like 5 together, yeah, it's not happening. Yeah, I dig it. This is definitely a different type of list, and a great way to showcase shooters, which have rarely seen play. Like, a lot of people had them as like backboard protectors at best. This is now really turning them into an offensive piece. And you know what? Even if you switch the Bad Snatchers over to King's Gitz, then you can start regenerating them a bit better, if that's more your style.
Yeah, there's all sorts of tweaks we could do here. Like, if the Gobblepalooza does get nerfed, you probably drop one of them, and I think you probably just chuck in another unit of 20 shooters in instead, which might be just better anyway. And if you're taking King's Gitz instead of Bad Snatchers, you'd be looking to put cogs in there for the reroll to cast, which is definitely a valid way of going about it. We could also do stuff like drop the Trog Boss and make the Fungoid Cave Shaman the general. And that way we can give him like the +1 to cast artifact, and then maybe the Loon Touch so he can cast an extra spell, or we can do Master of Magic so he can re-roll the cast. Yeah, all sorts of tweaks we can do here, but this is kind of the template. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and people know this by now, but I'll say it again. This is not the one way to play Gitz. We're presenting ideas and ways for you to build around, and you take it and run with it how you want to run with it. You know, like if you're going to drop the Trog Boss as your general, you maybe don't want to take Chasing the Moon. So again, a lot of ideas, but we're kind of showing you the thinking behind what we do, which then actually will lead me to the way I ran a list. So last weekend, I went 4-1 at a little 30-player event, and this was my list. So I ran a Loon Boss on Mangler Squig as the general, Fight Another Day, and the Loonstone Teeth Caps. I did Scraggy. I did the Squig Boss with the Nasher Squig. I also did a Fungoid Cave Shaman with Moonface Mommet, Issue Nuisance, and Tunnel Master. Had a Loon Boss, 36 Squig Herd, 10 Boingrot Bounders, 40 Stabbers, 10 Hoppers, and a Gobblepalooza with the Hand of Gork. So I was susceptible to anything that required that Indomitable. Luckily, I didn't face any because I was at 1995, 6 drops. It was interesting. Again, I wanted to go all in and just test the Loon Boss and see it at its full potential, right? I put on the command trait, I put on the artifact, I put it in its subfaction. Can you impress me? And like Shania Twain, that don't impress me much, because it's a lot of investment that could go somewhere else. But it was valuable. The Squig Herd absolutely slapped. The Boingrot Bounders were fantastic. The Stabbers I really enjoyed. And even if I was running a Spider or a Trog list, I can see value in running the Stabbers. I really do like them, but I don't want to try the I do want to try the shooters, but just being able to contest objectives within 9, which means that I get more bodies on the objective because a block of 40 is quite generous. I really enjoyed the Tunnel Master Mommet, but as you said, if we lost Tunnel Master, I probably wouldn't do Moonface Mommet. What else? Gobbapalooza, while it was really good and quite helpful, I think I really suffered from not having the sneaky snufflers. And if I ran this exact list again, I think I would swap the snufflers in for Gobbapalooza. What else? I really enjoyed the hoppers, even as a unit of 10, being able to just get objectives early, do some chip mortal wounds, generally harass. And once the Boingrot Bounders and the Loon Boss came in and deleted, they could then go around and start setting up the next combat or start securing backfield objectives, objectives that are now freed up. I quite liked it, actually. I thought this kind of worked really well, although I was not impressed with the Loon Boss on foot. I think his command ability on the stabbers, not very good, but on like the Boingrots, I think very good.
Yeah, I think with the Loon Boss on foot, he really needs either he needs the Tunnel Master or he needs the cloak to kind of get around, because he's really slow otherwise. And in this army, because we're running squigs that have run and charge, we don't really want to be using the auto 6 run on the hero to make sure he's in range. You kind of want to use that on the squigs. So often these sorts of little heroes are difficult to get in range. Yeah, but I think that tweak you made with the moving the Gobbapalooza for snuffers would be great, because that'd also get you to 1960, right? So you'd have a better Battleshock Triumph bid. Which I would worry about a little bit with the Squig herd, because they can't take Inspiring Presence. So once you're losing 20 of them, they're just dead, right? Yeah.
I think the idea was the Loon Boss was there to support the stabbers, but the amount of damage that the stabbers did was just unimpressive. So I think, to your point, I could have Scragrot sitting there or the Fungoid Cave Shaman there supporting them, and the Loon Boss could either be supporting the hoppers or the Boingrots, or just dropped it completely, or retooled, as you said, the Nightflyer Cloak. But this is just 3 list ideas that we kind of wanted to present to you. And again, take it with what you want. Go see the other video that we talked about with the Dankhold and the spiders. There's been plenty of Moon Clan lists where they've had the Arachnarok, spider as well, which is a great little monster hero. There's a lot of cool ways you can kind of build this army up, and it does work better now as a soup, as opposed to where previously it rewarded you to be in your little silo.
Yep.
We've talked a lot, and there's still a million questions I could ask you, but I'm not gonna do that. I want to ask some parting final comments, Stu. And if people want to listen more, you do have a YouTube channel. Again, go check it out. Link is down below. Stuart, the IrongutsmanMcCowan. Go check it out. Good channel. Videos coming up later, as you mentioned, a bit of a tier list. But how do I win? I've gone 4-1. You've gone 4-1. There's obviously really top tier builds that could be, tweaked. But imagine I'm a new Gitz player. What advice would you give me now that I'm a new player, picking up this army, super excited to run whatever I'm running?
So I think generally, the way that a lot of builds are going to work at the moment is you're going to have one thing that you build around. So if you're running your trogs, you might build around a unit of 9 fell waters or 9 trogs. If you're running your squigs, maybe you build around a unit of 30 hoppers. And then you want to find the key synergy pieces that build around that. So we've kind of talked about the Squig Boss, the Snufflers, the Loon Boss, Gobbapalooza. You stick those units around them. And then what you're looking for is to find some kind of solo operator units. Because you don't want to be in a situation when we're taking these big threats where your opponent chucks a gun hauler on an objective and you're oh, I got to send my 30 hoppers to go deal with the gun hauler. You don't want to be in that situation. So with this army, we want to make sure that we have some solo units that we can send out to do the dirty work while the hoppers go and do the fun stuff, right? You want maybe your sneaky unit of small Boingrots. Coach's list had 10 hoppers in there, right? That's a nice little solo operator unit. And And this is where you can have fun with the modeling side of the hobby, because there's heaps of viable solo operators. You can just pick the one that you like the look of the most and just try and make them work. So maybe you take your 9 Rockgut Trogguts, and then after that, you're like, I'm really feeling like I want to take a unit of 5 Spider Riders, paint them up real nice, and then you can use them there.
That's where the little Gargan, I think, comes in. The little Gargan is a great little solo operator that can do its own little thing. It can synergize well, but if not, let it be on the flank, be free, go do your thing.
Yeah. So there's heaps of freedom there. One thing I'd say with this army going forward is I think we know that there's going to be some nerfs. There's going to be some facts or some battle scrolls coming out. So to prepare yourself for that, you might find early on, you find the one, you might find 30 hobbits. It's like, this is the best thing I've played in ages. This is amazing. Well, I encourage you to go and try some other stuff in the book, because if the hoppers get nerfed, you're going to want something to fall back on. So maybe you go try your fanatics, you go try your shooters, you check out some trogs. There's all sorts of stuff that you can experiment in this book, because overall the level of the book is like pretty high. So you can try about a bunch of different stuff. It's going to work, and you can just have heaps of fun with it. Yep.
1,000%. At that tournament, I was so impressed with Squig Herd. I found myself on the website going to order 3 more boxes, because I already had 36 before this book. And I'm like, oh, I'd love another unit of 36, another Squig Boss. But I'm like, no, just wait to see what the new landscape looks like. But I think you're right. And that's why, like, I normally run mostly Moon Clan. I wanted to revisit Squigs again. I almost pulled out my Squig Gobber, the old Forge World Squig Gobber and the Colossal Squig. I was this close. I was going to Gobberpalooza with the Gobberpalooza with the Squig Gobber, and I was going to do I was going to drop the hell. I could drop the Loon Boss or Mangler Squig for a Colossal Squig. And just 18 wounds of pain. Like, play around. You're right. Like, play around with it, see what you like, and then as the meta kind of shifts and erratas come through, you're not fixed to one particular build, and you cry a little because you bought 72 Squig Herd that now are nerfed. So I think to your point, it's about like knowing your buff ranges, so knowing where your bad moons are going to be and anticipating what's going to happen if you fail that 1 to 3 and it doesn't move out of your quadrant. Knowing your ranges, especially in like a Squig build, because you're so fast, you can get yourself out of them pretty easily. But it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoy Squigs. And even Grots. I love them in the first book, and I still love them today.
Yep. I think in the next few months, the way we should do it is just treat it as like a festival of Gitz. Just enjoy everything that the new book has to offer, and learn the fundamentals of the army, and then I'm sure eventually we'll settle on a net list once all the nerfs have come out and stuff like that. Yep.
Yeah. Final question from the chat is, do you think there is any secret tech hidden in spiders? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, not the big ones, but I like the small ones.
Spider Riders?
Spider Riders and the Scuttle Boss, and I still quite like the web Spinner Shaman on a Ragnarok. But in terms of the Flinger and the Arachnaroks and the Scuttle, what's it called? The
Skitter Strand Ragnarok.
Yeah, thanks. Those ones I'm less hot on, but the small spiders, give them like maybe the Spore Spider buff for +1 attack, and then the 2 ways to make them do extra maulers when they roll 6s. It can be pretty good. But as I would say with spiders, the problem has always been, can you roll 5s and 6s? Because if you can't, not going to work. It's like Crawl Boys, isn't it? So yeah, I
think spiders are just in the wrong time at the moment. The meta isn't built for them. If this was like 6 months ago, when it was like super elite, people were avoiding their GVs and putting elite battle line as their, like, maybe this might be their world. But right now I feel like in the current GC meta, it's probably not their time to shine at the moment.
Yep. So probably what you mostly see is the 65-point cheeky lad with Tunnel Master. That's probably the Spider Fang contingent for a lot of lists. But anyway,
I love him. Stu, give some shout outs. Anyway, if people want to hear more from you and want to see some of your great, like you got a green crack. I'm talking too much today. Green crack video. You've done a couple of other videos. Give yourself a shout out and any people you want to thank.
Yeah, so you can obviously go check out my YouTube channel. I also did the Miscast podcast this week. So we did an episode on focusing on adapting to meta changes, which might be useful to check out once like some nerfs come out for this book, because we cover that. So you can go check out the Miscast podcast. And yeah, that's all the shout outs I have. Yep.
So link down below to go see Stuart's YouTube channel. Highly recommend checking it out. Thank you for hanging out. I hope between this video and the other video where we focused on the trogs and the spiders, you have a good, robust thinking around the way that top tier players are thinking about their armies, and you've got some new ideas regardless if you want to build spiders, trogs, Moon Clan, or squigs, or you want to super, you want to go all in. Hope you've got plenty of ideas. Now, as I've mentioned right at the top of the show, this is pre-errata, so who knows what's coming out. We'll obviously revisit this when the erratas come out, and some of the discussion will be enhanced. Some of it will be, well, Squig Herd are now bad because they've super nerfed them like they did with dragons 3 times.
Yep.
Please don't dragon my squigs. You owe us. You owe us for 18 months of trash. Just let me have 6 months in the sun, please.
Yeah.
All right,
I do miss the old underdog story though. I do like a good underdog story, which is how the book used to be. So maybe we'll get there one day. Anyway,
yeah, just leave us alone. Stuart, thank you so much. Chat, thank you so much. People who watch us on the replay, thank you so much. Let me know in the comment section legitimately what you think about the book. What are the combinations you're finding? How you're thinking about it? Is there things that we didn't talk about that you think is worth discussing? Leave it in the comments. You know how it is. Stu, thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. And let's go to the outro. See you, everyone. Bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.